This is John Jackson Miller, writer of Star Wars comics and novels, and you're listening to Star Wars with Stevie B. May the Force be with you.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to another Star Wars talk. Today, I have a very special guest for you. I have Mr. Joe Bongiorno. That's right, the man that created Supernatural Encounters. And let me tell you, our conversation that we had was phenomenal. We unpacked so much and talked about a wide variety of subjects. Let me tell you, his knowledge when it comes to science fiction, including Star Wars and the expanded universe, is incredible. He really does his research. He runs StarWarsTimeline.net, Royal Publishing Company of Oz. He is a multi talented, creative individual. And let me tell you, he is a gentleman and a scholar. He's so kind and down to earth. And it's just was a true pleasure and an honor to chat with him. This is the longest stream I've had yet. We could have kept talking for hours, but towards the end, my connection started to get a little funky, so I apologize for that. But you got a little special treat because Joe was still involved. So stay tuned for that. You're really going to like that. I hope you guys truly enjoy this. I want to thank you all for your support. It means the world to me. And without further ado, Mr. Joe Bongiorno. Kick it rolling here. There we go. Well, welcome, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. I've been looking forward to this after my conversation with Ken Palpatine that we both know, which you had he had quite the experience that he told us all about. And you seem just everything that I've heard about you so far through the Legends Con group and everything, you're a genuine, awesome person. And that's cool and that's great to hear.
Thank you. I've heard the same in regards to you as well.
Well, thank you. That's good to hear. I try, I try to keep it real. We need more nice people in the world.
Amen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just want to tell you a quick story. Um, when you first reached out to me, I was having a rough day, and I was just sitting on the couch. My wife was in the kitchen, and I get a message, and it's from you, and it literally just brightened my day, blew my socks off. I'm like, honey, Joe. And she's like, I can't read lips. Yeah. So it was just it made my day, and I was starstruck, to be honest. I still am. So
I'm glad. It warms my heart to hear that.
yeah,
I when I heard you didn't have a book, and you said, "Oh, I missed the deadline." You know, I was grateful to have had, a spare. There were a few spares laying around, and they were up for grabs for a bit, and different people were asking about them. So I think I got them out to most, although there are still a few people waiting for either 2025 Legends Con copies or the forthcoming unillustrated editions, which should be a 2 paperback set. Um, I'm trying to not, leave anybody behind, uh, who wants a copy. It was overwhelming, just the amount of people that like expressed interest. I hadn't anticipated that, in either with the convention or with just the book in general. So yeah, I'm working to create a situation so that it's not like a Heart of the Jedi thing where,
type of
like,
deal.
yeah, like on eBay, like those prices like became ridiculous.
You
So
crazy.
I hope to
It
prevent.
yeah. I looked into it at one time, and it's like, man, I couldn't. They were going for $300 at one time.
I
It's
mean,
like
that's the nature of the beast, but if they were at cost on Amazon for a bit. I didn't put them there, but I was
right.
grateful that somebody did.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I have a copy. Fortunately, I won one off of another channel.
you
So
did.
yeah.
Oh,
So
good.
I was like, whew, dodged a bullet there in the pocketbook. You know what I mean? But
That's great.
it's another thing that I've kind of said that it would be great to have like a docu series on like the past expanding universe because I'm just learning and growing into this. I've been a fan of Star Wars, my whole life, but I didn't realize how far it went beyond the films, right? and there's just so much material that was left out of the game, and it would be great. It would be an amazing documentary to see that, like, past authors talking or things, but who know? I don't have any experience, with rights and rules and regulations, so I'm sure that would probably be, with Lucasfilms or what have you.
Maybe. I mean, you should consider pursuing that. I mean, experience is something you gain, you know,
Yeah, by doing it, right.
by doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. Um, that happened with me a few times where I anticipated somebody would do something that I was interested in, and it never materialized, and it fell into my lap to pursue it because I had the interest and it didn't go away.
Well,
So
I
so
mean,
yeah, this may be your calling.
yeah, it could be because I mean, it's been on my mind, and I know there's a lot of folks in the Discord. I'm a part of a few Discords, and I read some of the interactions with everyone and their knowledge and their thoughts and ideas, and it's incredible what some of some other folks out there come up with or put out there.
Right. I strongly encourage you to do that, and gather, if you can, gather those who also share that interest to sort of help you to make it a reality.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, because we're all on the same team. We're all invested in this expanded universe, and um, we may have become a bit of a smaller group, but there are new people joining all the time,
yeah.
younger people, who have the energy and the interest, which is incredible to me.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling how passionate they are about it, and it's great. It's a good thing.
It really is. That's what's keeping it alive.
Yeah. I couldn't
It's the
believe
fans.
the
Yeah,
fans. Yeah, the fandom
yeah.
is just tremendous. It's got to be the biggest out there in my opinion. Um,
I hope you're right. We're Chris Nelson has talked about this before. We are a bit fractured in some regards, than say in decades past, where we there tended to be less places for us to congregate online, for
yeah.
example. And now, like you mentioned earlier, there's like a lot of different Discord servers and different places where we've found our nests and our our places that we feel comfortable in. Um, but I suspect you may be right. Like there may be a larger enclave than it might seem in any one individual server.
Yeah.
So I hope so.
Yeah. Maybe I'll have to start something and try to get some people on board because it'd be fun. Um,
Absolutely.
I know you've on off the topic quick, which we can get back into later, but you were a part of a documentary series for Black Sabbath, Masters of Reality. You
Yeah,
were our co-writer on that project, which
that's correct.
I was received very well.
I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, it was a tremendous project. I didn't spearhead it. The gentleman who did is fantastic and a huge fan and a great documentarian. Um, and if he does another Black Sabbath one, I hope to be part of it because there's a lot of misinformation online about about pretty much everything under the sun.
Everything
Yeah,
now,
about
yeah,
everything. So these books and documentaries are ways of setting the record straight, uh, especially for those of us who believe in like really doing the research and digging into it rather than just going based on hearsay or
yeah. And a lot
things
of
that
it was
yeah
like that back then. It was just
yeah
hearsay.
yeah.
Listen to it at, you can listen to a Black Sabbath album at 78 speed and there'll be a subliminal message and, you can listen to Stairway to Heaven backwards from Led Zeppelin and you'll see God or some, there's a lot of, funny things like that along the lines.
There are, and I mean, some of that stuff that could be fun and all as just like internet rumors or hearsay, but when it becomes confused with fact,
Yeah.
then it becomes a problem. And like Black Sabbath spent 10 years and longer and beyond trying to set the record straight, in terms of the fact that they were not involved in black magic or Satanism
Satanism,
or
yeah.
any of that stuff. Like, in fact, their songs spoke out against those things, I think, quite explicitly. So it is amusing to me that like that persisted for so long, and it just goes to show you like the power of rumor versus um, the necessity for research and getting to the heart of things. That
Yeah.
takes work. The other one is easy, and
Oh,
so
for sure.
the public tends to take the quick and easy path.
Yeah, exactly. And,
To-
the media wasn't, I mean, they didn't have Google. I mean, it's just what you heard in a headline was what you went off of.
yeah, exactly. What your friends said. What
Yep.
Yeah. That
So it's funny.
it is.
So I'd like to
Can't
go
tell you
back.
how many debates I've had with people, like just in person, who say, "Oh no, but I heard this." It's like, yeah, but I've studied this thing,
Yeah,
for
I know about it.
I
Yeah.
know that what you're saying is factually incorrect.
The best way to say it to someone is, did you do the research? Because I did, right? So I'd like to go back, Mr. Bongiorno, if we could, to like you growing up. Like, what were some of the things that you were influenced by to become this creative person that you are?
Wow, a lot, and I think that's maybe the case for many of us who have sort of creative minds. It a lot to begin with. So like even like my introduction to Star Wars, pre-Star Wars, was Lost in Space, and I often, my mom will even tell that story. Like I would come running home from school to catch Lost in Space in time, in reruns, and it was set up back to back with Land of the Lost, and I loved both of them.
Yeah.
So I would I would rush past friends and teachers and be like, I gotta be home, I gotta watch my show, and she would have like a little snack ready for me, and so that was like my routine, and it gave me something to look forward to. So I was ready for Star Wars, like when it
Arrival.
debuted. Like I was like really like I was the perfect like demographic for that, and that spun off into specifically into like the origins of that genre and its sister genre, which is weird fiction, going back into the pulps, because that sort of came next, almost, and fantasy too, to some degree. So I'm speaking specifically of like H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard and Clark Ashton Smith, but also C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. Like that, those were like natural fits that just sort of organically, like, oh wow, like this stuff was all written for me, and
It spoke to you.
it spoke. It absolutely did, and that hasn't stopped. Like there's a lot like I've talked about this frequently. Like Star Wars didn't emerge out of thin air. Like there's a long tradition of space opera, going back to the 1920s, going back actually even further if you look at like some of the work of Edgar Rice Burroughs, um, who like the pulp authors really ran with, in a sort of unofficial shared universe. Um, so like I'm speaking specifically of like Lee Brackett and Edmund Hamilton, and Henry Kuttner and C.L. Moore, and many, many, many more. That sort of their foundation was Burroughs, and his Barsoom Mars stories. But you can go back centuries and you'll find like proto space opera, like
Mhm.
that was something that humans have always, because what is it? It's adventure stories
Yep.
in other worlds, and that runs in tandem with, with fantasy and even horror to some degree, which is adventures um whether, like portal fantasy, like adventures in other worlds, and that's not necessarily planets, but like parallel worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or in the case of Tolkien, it would be more like the ancient past, the imaginative ancient past. And horror kind of brings the other world into our world, usually the darker aspects. So it's all sort of interconnected, and it was more interconnected back before we had sort of like the corporate takeover of genre fiction, and then things became very delineated. Perhaps even before that, though, with sort of the advent of science fiction, because the if you look at Gernsback and if you look at John W. Campbell, like they were trying to separate themselves from other things, and yet it's still part of the larger fold. And there was a lot of crossover, and that was like a Wild West sort of situation where you had a lot of writers trying a lot of things, and not everything was necessarily successful, but you didn't have an imposed formula on these things. They were very out there. And some things stuck, and some things, have been forgotten since, and some things shouldn't, and perhaps some things should. So it was just that was a really fertile period, and it really is directly out of that. I'm speaking specifically to the pulp, like Weird Tales, and Amazing Stories, and many others around that time. 1920s, 1930s. Like Star Wars really springs 1940s with Lee Brackett. Star Wars springs directly out of that. In some ways that are explicit, and in other ways that are more subtle. But like the first lightsaber comes from Edmund Hamilton in The World of Kaldar. He describes it, like, if you read the passage, it is exactly the lightsabers in Star Wars.
Really?
Yes, like to a T.
Wow.
And that's one of many, many things that are, that Lucas borrowed from, like very directly borrowed from, which is fascinating. And then, of course, with Lee Brackett becoming basically the screenwriter for The Empire Strikes Back. She died before she could do a second draft. And so Larry Kasdan had to be brought in. But it is still essentially like 95% her story. And that story has roots. It has roots to older, traditions and stories in space opera. So it's wild.
That's crazy.
It is.
That's
It
a
is.
lot.
I didn't know a lot of this myself. This all came out of a lot of research when I wanted to really kind of delve into, because we don't know, like our generation and younger generations don't really know. They oftentimes, they have a very cursory idea of what this thing is. And then if you watch something like James Cameron's History of Science Fiction, and it's very much not, it's like, it's more like, here's some movies we want to talk about, like that was pretty much it. It was not the history of science fiction. So that's something I've been really delving into, because I think it's important for us as fans to know our roots and to remember where these things come from, in large part because some of these old stories are so good.
Yeah.
They really are.
It's kind of unfortunate that as time goes on, things get forgotten, like the roots.
Yeah.
And, you make a valid point there of should go back and study it and learn about it, because I had no idea. That just blew me away, some of what you were just saying. I'll probably have to go back and listen to what you were just saying again.
I want to, like, one of my hopefully future projects, because I've got a few that were put to the wayside, or to the back of the line when Supernatural Encounters came back to the fore in 2014 or so. But once I finish up those projects, which includes, by the way, the third Black Sabbath book, which should have been out years ago, I want to do something called like before Star Wars, or because there are a few books like before Tolkien or before Oz, sort of with that title, and I was thinking of doing one called Before Star Wars, where I could include not only an essay on the history of space opera, which is a presentation I made at Legends Con, which hopefully you guys will see soon when they release that. But I want to expand on that, and I want to include some of the stories that had direct influences specifically into supernatural encounters. Because there are some things that you'll read and be like, this, I don't know where this is coming from, or it seems interesting, but I wonder what this is. So I made certain connections that we just spoke of a bit more explicit than they even were previously. So by including some of those stories, many of which are in public domain, you guys will get an opportunity for perhaps a richer experience, or at least one that's more contextually
put together.
Yeah, that's the right word, put together.
Yeah.
So you say, oh, all right, so this is part of this, larger thing. And again, like no spoilers, but unless you want spoilers, but when you read the book, we can talk again, and perhaps we can get into deeper spoilers at that point. Because I try to be cagey, because I don't want to interfere with the experience, because I feel like that's an important one, like between the reader and the book. And there's nothing worse, like nothing ruins that more than an author coming out and saying, no, this definitively is this. Like in certain circumstances, if somebody goes like really far afield, and says something like crazy, like, oh, like supernatural encounters is a fascist work, then of course I'm going to come out and say,
right,
no, it's the opposite. Like we were talking earlier, like with Black Sabbath, like, oh, they're Satanists. No, it's the opposite. So something to that degree, of course, I would say, no, that's not the case. But by and large, like your experience, your interpretations, that's yours. That belongs to you individually, and you can discuss it with other fans and debate it, and that's all great and fun. But I'm not gonna bring down like my hand of authority and say, no, this was this. No, absolutely not.
That was beautifully said, because that's how I feel about an experience with the book, right? Some friends of mine were reading the new Jedi Order together, local friends. We get together once a week and meet. Yeah. And, spoiler here, which I'm sure everyone knows by now, but we lose one of our favorites, Chewbacca. Well, I unfortunately already knew that, but they didn't. So
cool.
that was it was cool to see that experience through them when they talked about it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's beautifully said, because it's what you feel with the book. I'm currently reading the Sword of Truth series by Terry Goodkind.
Oh,
as well. Oh, I'm just in love with it.
Really?
In love with it.
I'll have to add it to my growing list.
Yes, I tried reading 2 books at a time, and I can do it. We're reading Star Wars, and I'm reading that on the side.
Nice.
So, but yeah, that experience, there's nothing like that with a book.
Yeah,
nothing like that.
I agree. It's much more intimate even than watching film. And don't get me wrong, there are films that can do that. That is special when you find that, with the film, but books tend to lend themselves to a more intimate, because you're filling in the pictures. You're filling in a lot. So that's a beautiful experience that sadly has sort of maybe dropped off. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak sociologically too.
Right.
Like maybe it has picked up. I'm not sure. I mean, the publishing industry has consolidated to like 3 or 4 like big publishers, and their numbers, like with streaming numbers, like their numbers aren't necessarily ones we can rely upon or trust, or so the transparency isn't necessarily there. But I am curious to know, like, how many young people, how many people in general are reading now compared to 20 years ago, compared to 50 years ago.
That's great. Yeah. I wonder that too, because you are right. It does feel like the imagination is a beautiful thing. It brings out so much in someone. And today, I don't, but with, I mean, social media can be a great thing, a positive tool, but also I feel like I don't know how to say it. It doesn't, kids don't seem like when you grew up or when I grew up, like the generational lines have changed.
Indeed, they have, and that's sort of part of my concern because I mean, concern is too strong a word, but it is some degree of concern in that there are so many distractions now, and many that I would describe as frivolous,
Mhm.
perhaps. And don't get me wrong, social media is an amazing tool for us to connect.
Yeah.
So let's not, let's keep a balance. I feel with that. I've made many friends via social media, and
Yeah.
continue to, like
Mm.
you and I at
You
this
and I,
point,
yeah.
yeah, which is amazing. But there is a dark side to it, and but maybe with time, as young people mature, they learn to discern between how their time is spent,
Right.
and to avoid some of the more negative aspects that are inherent to social media, and to the way the tech giants sort of want to control our time and our spending money. So yeah, that's my hope.
Yeah.
And I think
I
the younger
agree.
generation is smarter than my generation was at the same, in those same years. I don't think we were particularly aware of the world, and how it was than younger people are now. Like they
Compared,
amaze
yeah.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. You get news the snap of a finger now
Right.
all over the world,
Yeah.
which is incredible.
Yep.
And it also can be scary.
Absolutely.
So you did a lot of reading. You liked a lot of the Lost in Space, by the way. My wife was a big fan of that. She grew up watching that with her dad. So we have the whole collection.
Oh, that's great.
Yes. So
That's fantastic.
we were watching it one day, and our kids came through, and they kind of stopped and looked at the television. Was like, "What's going on here? And something changed with the TV?" Or
How old are your kids, if you don't mind my asking?
one of my boys is 13. The
Oh,
other one is 15. My daughter's 21, and then we have an 8-year-old
wow. You've,
and
you've
two
got the whole
cats
and two cats.
and one dog.
Oh, that's beautiful. I
Yes.
love it. I've
Yes.
got 4 cats and one dog. One of ours just passed a
Oh,
month ago. So yeah, that was rough. But that's
sorry to hear that.
beautiful, man. You've got the whole gamut there.
Yeah,
I
we need
love
a
that.
bus. Yes. So you have 4 cats, eh? Is there a special breed that you have, or is it just
No, I wonder if you could see. There's one.
Oh, yeah.
There's another one there. I think there's this one behind me here.
Wow, look at that. They're all hanging out with dad.
Randolph, Strider, and Roscoe. Yeah. So that's
Nice.
that's 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 3 of the 4.
Yeah.
Um, One I cannot allow in the room because she's tiny and she's adorable, but she sprays if she sprays due to this one
Oh.
behind me. Something about their relationship that causes her to spray and mark her territory, and I've got a lot of books in here.
Yeah,
So
I've had that happen.
you have.
On all my textbooks when I was going to school for electrical,
Oof.
all of them were just wrecked, and that was a
Oh,
lot of money.
that is a lot of money. Uh-huh.
Yeah. But what do you do?
What do you do? I mean, the kids and pets, they're unpredictable, and you've got to take the good with the bad because we love them, and they don't mean to do things that are harmful.
Right.
Just it just teaches us, oh, let's keep our precious things away.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
we rescued one from the shelter, and then the other one we got a ragdoll breed. If you've ever heard of that before.
Oh, those are gorgeous. Yeah.
She is the sweetest cat in the world. She sleeps between me and my wife every night. She knows when it's bedtime. She'll lay her head on me sometimes, and I'll read to her when I'm laying in bed. She's precious.
Oh, I believe it 100%. You know,
Yeah.
cats and books go together
Very
really
well.
well. Yeah.
Very well. You are absolutely right. And then our dog is a golden doodle.
Oh man, that's great. Those are also wonderful, wonderful breeds.
Yeah. She's a little hyper, this one, though.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I'm surprised. Okay. I'm
A
thinking
lot
more like relaxed. Yeah.
docile right now, not this one. My wife went and picked her out, and she, of course, had to pick the one that was doing somersaults and trying to bite her ear when she was a puppy and just going crazy. I'm like, honey, you got to pick the one that's just kind of chilling.
Well,
But she's good.
I ended up too. Same thing. The one current dog and then the previous one were both rescues from different organizations, and one was neurotic, and the other one I used to say was psychotic. I had to keep him away from the cats, from people, from wildlife, because he just had this very well, I guess in retrospect, I didn't realize his breed was predisposed to being a bit overprotective. He's a Mastiff Borbal
Ooh,
combination, and
yeah.
the Borbal one, which I had never heard of before, like Boerboel. Um, they're extreme. They're the most protective breed. Now I hadn't known that, but there were incidences that taught me very quickly on, like, you need to keep him separate from
Well,
he's
I mean,
great with us, like he's great with the family and those
yeah,
he knows, but like if you were to come over, I'd have to put him in his cage.
yeah.
Sadly, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's great that he knows to take care of you guys, That's a big thing and a good thing.
That's a positive. Yes, I like that. That's a positive way of putting it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So I guess you've been involved in a lot of different projects. Like you are a very creative person.
Thank
You
you.
were the game testing thing, kind of like, what's that experience like? Like,
Oh, you did your research too, I see.
well, oh, of
I'm
course.
impressed. Yeah. um, with West End Games, that was how I broke in to Star Wars was through them. I was an associate manager at, I think it was B. Dalton at the time.
Oh, I miss that bookstore.
I do too. Well, you see that, I think, yeah, because I was also for Walden Books. I was also associate manager, but I think that was later. Anyway, so this was B. Dalton, and I was responsible for. This was in '90. This was in the very early '90s. So like Truce of Bakura had just come out. Dark Empire had just come out, and nobody knew what it was. Like as far as like book readers. In fact, this is a funny little side story. When the first Jedi Academy book came out, I would have customers come up to me because everybody, like all the other employees, like basically if they had a customer had a Star Wars question, they were like, go talk to Joe.
Yeah.
So people would come up to me and say, oh, in what book did Luke turn to the dark side? Because I feel like I missed something.
Yeah.
And I would say, oh, that's in Dark Empire. Oh, what's Dark Empire? I said, oh, well, that's a comic book series. Oh, I don't read comic books. Like that was a big thing back then. I don't read that stuff. So I would have to explain, like, well, this isn't like comic books like you might be thinking of them, like of like your parents' generation comic books. Like this is like a serious part. It's connected to the books, and it's a great story.
It is.
And when the graphic novel came out, I called up Dark Horse and I said, we need X amount of copies in here. So I would, as a graphic novel, it was a bit more palatable. Like people would say, oh, okay. Like maybe it was just less daunting. They didn't have to go hunt down back issues. The whole story was right there, So I would just basically then hand them Dark Empire. So I began a relationship with Dark Horse, and I began a relationship with West End Games because I would also bring their books in, because this is part of the expanding universe of the time. So that was fun, and I got to really develop a friendship with Bill Smith, who at the time was one of the head editors at West End Games, and I pitched the idea for a role-playing game adventure to appear in that Game Master screen. I wrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it and submitted it, with maps and, like the crude maps that that I would make on paper. And he apparently loved it, but the book had grown too crowded with submissions. Maybe I took too long to submit it. I'm not sure. But he said, but listen, I'm going to pay you for it, and I'm going to give you a credit in the book. Now, this was a funny thing because at the time there were other writers who weren't getting paid, but I asked for payment like in books because I was still missing, a chunk of the West End Games Star Wars books. So I got everything. Like he sent me everything I didn't have, which was amazing.
That's
so
cool.
I got paid, but the story didn't get published. Whereas others, the stories got published, but they didn't get paid. So that's how the SWFA formed, the Star Wars Fanboy Association, which was named ironically. And that's when I first met, Abel and Pablo and Dan and several others at the time. I'm sorry, his name is escaping me. The Essential Guide to Warfare.
I'm not gonna even try to guess.
Yeah, it'll come to me at some point. I finally got. He lives in New York, and I finally got to meet him at Legends Con in California, which is hilarious. Like we're like 45 minutes away. I'm like, Jason Fry.
Okay.
I said, Jason, we have got to like properly get together. And I had already known Rich Handley at that point because he also lives about a half hour from me in the other direction. In fact, I just hung out with him on Thursday, which we hadn't seen each other since before the pandemic, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And we swapped books. I gave him Supernatural Encounters, and he gave me his new Swamp Thing book. Which was great because I was the one who first got him into Swamp Thing. I sort of handed him the comics. I was like, read these.
That's
Alan
an
Moore.
old classic there.
Yeah. It's like,
That's
you must
cool.
read these. So, yeah, so Rich and so once the West End Games thing had sort of finished, I was sending my timeline also to West End Games and to Dark Horse Comics, to Bob Cooper specifically. So that they had a sense of where everything took place. And my focus really was on making sure the older stories were included. So the Marvel Comics and Splinter of the Mind's Eye and the Brian Daley books, the L. Neil Smith books, the newspaper strips. Because as a kid, I used to cut those out of the newspaper. And I've since lost them, which is such a shame. But I mean, at least they've been properly reprinted now by Marvel, by IDW, and of course by Dark Horse in those reformatted editions. So that was the goal, was, hey guys, let's not forget, this new stuff is great, but let's not forget what came before. Because this is all part of, as far as I was concerned, this is all part of the story,
Yeah.
I even handed copies to this was when Mike Stackpole's first book came out. I got to hang out with him at Icon, which was a convention out here in Stony Brook. And I gave him my timeline. I gave Tim Zahn my timeline. So I was like, all right, guys, because Mike had included Throg in that first X-Wing book. Throg from the Star Wars 3D #1. Luke hands his homestead over to Throg, who was apparently like displaced or homeless or whatever the case was. So Luke basically handed the deed to him, which was neat. And Mike included that detail. So I was like, that was sort of like the main conversation I was having with Mike. I was like, wow, you included Throg. Like, that's a really obscure, deep lore reference. And he's like, oh yeah, I had a friend who told me about him. So I was like, this is how a breathing, living, expanded universe functions.
Works.
Yeah.
Well, that's perfect to kind of lead into that because, you got the Star Wars timeline.net that you put together. And it's incredible.
Thank you.
I've been on that site before, and I had no idea it was you, so I apologize for that. But
No worries.
man, that takes some work, and you're right. Like them little references, them names, and like after reading some of the past material and now reading through the new Jedi Order, people are popping up, and it's like, oh, I know that. I know that name. I know that place. It's awesome. It's great how everything just kind of, for the most part,
Yeah, for the most part.
right?
It's
Like,
perfect. It's never going to be perfect because there's humans that
yeah,
that are
I mean,
behind this. So
yeah,
we can't expect perfection. And it's one thing if it's like a single author, Tolkien is the sole author of his works. And even he had to create a retcon, in the Hobbit, because initially those early editions, Bilbo gifts the ring. I keep saying Bilbo. Gollum gifts the ring to Bilbo. But once Tolkien realized that the One Ring, had the essence of Sauron in it, and it was evil, and Gollum would never have done that, he changed it for the Lord of the Rings. But he created a retcon so that that version was still valid, in the sense that that's what Bilbo told people. Oh, Gollum gifted me this ring. So
mm,
so you see, like, even in the case of where it's a single author, sometimes there are changed conceptions, and sometimes there are mistakes that creep in, and so even Tolkien himself had to provide a retcon, let alone now imagine with the expanded universe, and now there's hundreds of writers and editors, and they may not all be on the same page. So, but again, this is why you have guys like Abel and Rich and Dan, and
yeah,
then later on myself, able to kind of fill those in so that you guys reading it, it'll all be seamless, by and large.
and it's great, and I appreciate that work, and I'm sure we all appreciate that work. So, was there a moment where you're like, I need to do this? I need to get everything in order here. Did you know what I'm trying to say? Like, did you have I got an epiphany here. I got a
With the timeline or with
yeah
supernatural
with
encounters?
the timeline.
Yes, because it was just like what you were saying earlier about the project that you're thinking about. It's like I kept thinking, well, someone's going to do this, but kind of nobody really did, um, in the way that I thought it should be done. So don't get me wrong. Mike Beidler had a timeline. Jason Fry had a timeline, and Rich Handley had timelines. And this is incidentally how I first met them, because I wrote to them because I wasn't happy with certain
With
aspects of their timelines. It's like either like they were leaving out the Marvel series. Jason left out Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which I thought was complete blasphemy. Mike had a more sardonic view of the older stories, which I thought maybe wasn't appropriate. So, and it was at that point that said, well, all right, I need to put together one that I feel represents like Abel G. Pena. Sorry, I sometimes use their first names without giving you guys context. But Abel has this. I like how he words it. He talks about being a maximalist versus a minimalist, and a minimalist is someone. And you can be different. There are different kinds of minimalists. Like there are those who like only accept the films. Like that's like, yeah, and there are those who only accept certain films, like, oh, I
yeah,
don't accept the prequels, only the originals, or the originals and the Ewok movies. So there are different forms of minimalism. But the idea with them is to sort of leave things out that they don't like or haven't read or don't understand. Which is fine. Don't get me wrong. Like that's fine. That's legitimate. That's what you're into. Cool. All good.
right.
But the maximalist approach is the one that many of us take, which is, if it fits, if it can be made to fit in some way, shape, or form, we're going to include it. Like, it doesn't matter if it's, if the canonicity is quasi-canonical, like with some of the French role-playing game stuff, or the Hungarian Han Solo series, which has now been
Yeah,
translated.
that's coming out.
Thank the maker, that's coming out. Thank you, Matthew Smith. But like, that doesn't concern us. Does it fit? Can it be made to fit? reasonably. And as long as there's some measure of quality there, why leave it out? Why not, take on that challenge and bring it in? That, to me, that's much more fun. And it also, because there are fans of those things too. So let's bring everybody under this umbrella, this big EU umbrella. And so I don't like to, again, I personally don't, I remember, like I said, even back in the day when people did read Dark Empire and they said, no, this doesn't, I don't feel that this works, or whatever, they would oftentimes use harsher terms. But, so to me, it was like, well, why not? I mean, but my brain, I realized that later on, like many years later, that like my brain automatically provides retcons where needed. So like I'm already figuring out, oh, well, this must have happened, or that must have happened, like off screen or whatever.
Right.
So that's why with the timeline, it was easy in a sense for me, because so let me give you an example instead of just talking in generalities. In the Russ Manning newspaper strip, what's the name of that particular one? I think it was the Kessel Run, or I don't know if that was the actual name of it, but it was about the Kessel Run.
Okay.
And Han is working for Jabba, and like to the average reader, that must have been like bizarre. Like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
That's Russ Manning wasn't paying attention to, or nobody told him. No, that wasn't the case. If you look at chronologically, like in terms of when these things were written, in the Marvel series, Jabba had forgiven Han's debt in issue, I want to say 38, where he meets Jabba the Hutt, like the skinny version of Jabba, which in itself needs to be retconned as, oh, well, this is a guy working for Jabba who, he's got such authority that he uses Jabba's name, like that's how loyal he is. I think his real name Heater. Is that? I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that last part. But anyway, so you have this forgiveness occurring. And so therefore, Han and Jabba are back on good terms. And what he's delivering to Kessel, now known as Little Kessel, I believe, because that was another retcon that needed to happen. The original depiction of Kessel was as this beautiful, like almost paradisaic world. But what Han is delivering to them is it's not spice, like illicit spice. It's like food and medicinals, because the Empire is basically trying to starve them out or harm them in some way, shape, or form. So it actually all fits, but you kind of have to have been following the events.
Yeah.
It's kind of like with the Crystal Star. Why is Luke so depressed in that book? Well, we didn't know it at the time, but Planet of Twilight takes place before then, and Luke had just broken up with Callista, or she broke up with him. I forget like how that actually happened, but there was a breakup, and so Luke was depressed, and this was someone he thought was the love of his life. So it makes sense when you read it
in that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. I get totally what you're saying. Some of these things I have not read yet. I actually have the omnibus of the newspaper strips.
Ooh,
by the way, that was
nice. You're in for a treat.
So yeah, there's a lot of material I haven't read, like on the comic book side of things. But Dark Empire is one of them. I just want to throw that out there, and it's phenomenal.
I'm envious of you, because I remember reading them the first time and just falling in love all over again.
The artwork and everything, it fit. To me, it made sense. Right? Like you were saying, some folks weren't they were like, this is rubbish.
Yeah.
Whatever. But it's like, no, I don't really. Everything I read, like we were talking about earlier with your imagination and the mind, like it all, like obviously you're going to have hiccups where some books just don't stand out like others. Right.
Yeah.
but just that experience, and you can visually see it, and it's just cool. It just makes sense to me so far, if
Well,
that makes sense.
it does, absolutely. And of course, like because there are so many stories, of course there are going to be some that maybe don't resonate with you the same,
Right.
and maybe even some in which, in which the author maybe dropped the ball a bit. I mean, like I said, we're only human. So I won't mention, any by name scoundrels, like they're so there there are going to be some that just don't, like, for you personally, and maybe there are others who love it,
Right.
and that's fantastic. Like, if it works for you, that's beautiful. I would never say, like, oh well, I didn't like it, so therefore it should be removed, from canon, like, or what we consider EU canon, specifically. No, it's like, you know, different strokes for different folks, man. So
That's right.
you've got to allow other fans to have the things that they enjoy. Look, I love the Crystal Star, which in my generation everybody trashed, and that's had a bit of a renaissance where people are reading and saying, "Oh, actually, this book is not the horrible
It's
thing
not
everyone said it was. It's
right.
fine."
I enjoyed it. Yeah,
Oh, fantastic!
I
See,
did.
hey,
Yep.
I'm glad to hear it. You
Yeah,
know,
it was interesting. I've heard obviously it's a very controversial book. People got mixed reviews, or like you said, they call it
yeah,
trash, and it's like, no, it was actually a pretty cool story.
yeah.
You know, "Well, what do you think of Waru?" Well, it could happen.
It can happen. I mean, this is space opera. I mean, the limit is your imagination. I loved Waro, but see, I was biased because, so we were talking about West End Games and the role playing game adventure I had written for them. It included a creature, an entity like Waru, but this was like before Crystal Star had come out, and the entity's name was Uradrill, which I maintained and kind of put him into supernatural encounters, just so that wasn't lost, and created a connection between him and Waru, a very intimate connection.
Okay.
So, you know, no, I don't, nothing is lost. I don't like the idea of anything being lost. Although I may have lost the actual art role-playing game adventure that I wrote, but at least the character is like alive and, and well. So yeah, I like that stuff. That's all going back to the pulps, that spawned Star Wars, and that the original four architects of the expanded universe were very heavily influenced by, and those four guys are Roy Thomas, Archie Goodwin, Russ Manning, and Alan Dean Foster. And they were all heavily inspired by the pulps that I was speaking about earlier,
Yeah.
like very heavily inspired. And we can kind of go into that a little bit later if you want to, specifically with Alan Dean Foster, including Cthulhu in Splinter of the Mind's Eye. Like the very first EU book has a crossover to, this Cthulhu mythos. And then, of course,
Yeah.
Lucas himself does a crossover with ET, which is like, in Spielberg's, sort of side
Wheelhouse,
of the
right.
world. Yeah. So it's the stuff is wild. Like, so if you're open to, like, I like the Iceberg, like, idea that Alex had done a video on, Some Raptor. His screen name is. If you guys want to check that out on
Okay.
YouTube, it's super cool. But he does this iceberg thing where, like, Star Wars goes deeper and deeper and deeper, like the lore, with like this obscure lore. It's wild because, and I think now, like, your generation and, the younger people in general who are getting into the EU, they're a lot more open to all of this stuff than my generation had been. We had been very, like, again, minimalist. We'll just leave it at that. Like,
Yeah,
very,
yeah.
oh no, no, no. Okay,
But
whatever floats your boat.
yeah, and then things change over time,
They do.
like you said,
Yeah,
which is great.
it
Which is a
is.
good positive thing.
It really is, man. I'm glad you said that. It is 100% positive. I love it.
Yep. That's what.
Excuse me 1 minute. One
Sure,
of my
no.
cats getting into mischief.
Go ahead, sir.
Out you go.
Got this here.
Okay.
All right, over here.
He gets restless.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I don't want to keep you. Are you on a time schedule or
No,
anything?
I'm yours.
Cool. You know, if I was famous enough, sir, I would have flew you out and had you here. We could play with some toys. I would have cooked you dinner. My wife and I would have cooked you dinner. I wish I could do that. I
That
truly do.
sounds
For everyone I talk to.
great. Thank you
You
for
know?
saying that. It
Yeah.
just thought alone is super appreciated.
Yeah, that's how I wish I could. I truly, with everyone I've talked to, it would just be fun, you know.
It
Just
absolutely would.
I know I kind of jump around, but you went to Legends Con and I'm sure that experience was great. You know, you got to meet with fans, and like I said, they had such a great experience talking with you and meeting you. You know, your book. I want to throw that out there. I know we talked about it, but I mean, I received it the other day. There it is, Supernatural Encounters. This is put together so beautifully too, by the way. I just
Thank
want to
you.
say I couldn't believe it when I picked the box up off the porch. I'm like, what else did he send me? You know, because it was like it's a thick book. I mean, the trial and transformations of Arthur Hexlerfont, just phenomenal.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of work. Yeah, worth it. Worth it because the expanded universe is worth it. And the fans are worth it. You guys, like it's a love letter to the fans and to the universe, which is at the moment no longer being continued. We have hopes that perhaps it will be at some point. But regardless if it is or not, we're keeping it alive, in all various different ways. You're doing it through this channel right now, and other fans are doing it in their own ways through art or through cosplay or role-playing games, whatever it is, even if it's just reading the books and talking about it to friends and family, whatever the case is, it's this community that has kept this thing alive. Maybe despite what the corporate powers that be wanted,
Right.
I don't know. It does seem that way at times, but anyway, not to be negative, because Legends Con was a super positive experience for everybody, fans and authors and the people running it, all who did a great job. Everyone there was super awesome.
That's all I've heard is great positive things about it.
Yeah,
and that's awesome.
It was like, the only negative was which you heard from Nick, was our flight getting there, which was like a harrowing experience. Although it did, like it bonded us, like,
Yeah.
which was cool, like, and those things do, like, adversity can bond you, if you make it through. And we made it through. Like we had each other. We had the five of us and Jupiter the cat. And, like, it was an adventure, and we all helped each other out, because it's so stressful, that if you're there by yourself, God forbid, because you don't know what to do. And that's really where my upset is with, towards JetBlue, is what if it had been my mom there by herself? She doesn't have a cell phone. You just leaving somebody high and dry is so ridiculous. So yeah, I'm still like, on that one aspect, I'm upset. Or what if it was a child? Like, like
I mean, I flew a buddy of mine years ago. He got out of the service and he flew me out to Virginia, and it was the first time I really, took a flight for a long distance like that. And I had a layover in O'Hare Airport in Chicago. I'm from Wisconsin. And it's just the massive. I was kind of like, I didn't know what to really do. It was my first time. I'm looking around. I mean, this was back in 2011. So, I mean, it was, yeah, I can just imagine. And I mean, that's great that you guys all got together and shared that. That's a book on its own right there.
It is. It is. I told Kyle, I said, you should write our adventures down, because there were so many hurdles that we had to navigate. like one after the other. It's like, wow, could anything else go wrong? And yet, we persevered. And this is like this microcosm story is like a life lesson for the macrocosm of our life, which is, that's what life does. Like, it throws you hurdles, sometimes hurdle after hurdle, and you have to navigate them. You have to persist. You have to move forward, no matter what.
Yeah.
And we did. And sure, we got there a little late, but we got there. We made it. So that was incredible. And how rewarding it was, because all the fans, I mean, when I finally made it to the convention hall, and there was this long line of fans waiting to meet me, which was surreal and wonderful, because they wanted books, or they had books that they wanted signed, and it's a beautiful thing. It's gratifying, 100%. So Legends Con 2025, I think will be bigger. There'll be more authors there. So I'm excited. I'm just excited to meet all of you guys in person, and to get to hang out with you is, like, to me, like, that's the beauty of this thing.
That's
people.
the experience. Yeah, and that connection and that bond.
Yeah,
it's great, man. You're exciting me talking about it.
Oh, cool.
So I know, jumping back a little bit here, when did you know you wanted to be a writer?
Oh, since I was tiny, since I was really young, since I first began reading. It was I graduated from Curious George to basically, like, sci-fi, fantasy, horror. In fact, do I have it here? Yeah, hold on one second.
Sure.
Let me show you something.
Absolutely, this is exciting. We got some exclusive material coming here from Mr. Bongiorno that he likes. There it is.
This is that on camera? There we go. This book made me want to become a writer.
Vampire werewolves.
And in fact,
That's cool.
So this is that's the school library, and if you go to the back,
you got the punch card in there.
And this is my handwriting. So I took it. Can you
up a little bit?
Sorry about that. Up.
There we go.
But I took this book out repeatedly.
Wow.
There we go. So many years later, I went to the school library, and I said, this is the book that inspired me to become a writer. And they said, the principal said, take it. Like, take.
That's cool.
Like, what? Yeah. He said, take it home. And so I did. And then I found this is how it would have looked in bookstores.
Oh, wow.
So you can see, yeah, there was a series of these. There's about 6 that Roger Elwood had edited. Some science fiction ones, fantasy and horror ones. But this book, it just captured. I still think the stories hold up. Like sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes you go back to things you enjoyed as a child, and it's like, oh, all right, maybe
it's not the same, right?
It's not the same, yeah. But this really is, like, these stories really still hold up. They're still very effective, and that's because he brought in actual, genre writers. Some of them changed their names. Just that was like a thing back in, like, the sort of the 40s to the 70s. They would use pseudonyms if they were writing in different genres, but by and large, they were all, like, established, writers, and the stories are solid. And I just at that time said, this is what I want to do. I didn't think it was practical. I didn't think I necessarily would be able to, but the sort of obsession to do it didn't leave my brain, for better or worse. It started a love of reading and a love of writing, from a very young age.
That's awesome, because that's kind of, it always interests me when someone that is creative, how they became inspired, because you always hear stories of, well, I watched this film, or I read this book, your case, or I heard this song and I knew I wanted to be a drummer or a guitar player. You
Yeah.
know, as
Yeah.
a kid growing up, I wanted to be a rock star. Well, that didn't pan out for me, but I learned to play the drums a little bit and the
Oh,
guitar.
nice.
Yeah. So
Do
I
you
would
still
stand
play?
no, I can't sit. I have some health issues, so I either
Mm,
stand or I lay down. So yeah, unfortunately, well, I suppose I could probably get a kit. I mean, Rick Allen figured it out with one arm,
that's true.
which I met him, and he's an awesome gentleman.
Oh, nice.
Yes,
Good to hear.
one of my first concerts I ever went to was Joan Jett and Def Leppard.
Ah,
Yep,
nice. I've seen
yep,
both as well. Yeah,
very
great
good.
bands live. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's my first. It was like 98, 99. My dad took me out of high school because my dad. To jump on the music thing a little bit, I can give a shout out to my parents because my dad was in a garage band, local band, a singer. So he was always like the rock star kind of guy. I loved that.
Cool.
Black Sabbath, that's where I heard him. He had albums, all the albums, and
Nice.
and my mom she liked rock, but she was more into like the pop sound back then. So
Right.
I have a wide variety of music that I love.
Beautiful, man.
So I mean, music is, well, you know that as well. It can speak to you
Absolutely.
and help you through a lot of things.
100%. That's what the arts are for,
Yeah.
I believe. To not just entertain us on a surface level. And that's fine. That there's plenty of room for that too. But I mean, on a very deep, profound level, it can affect us and help us get through things. Because life is hard. I
Yes.
mean, let's not beat around the bush. Life can be very, very hard. Great art just will carry us through. They'll give us that boost. That's something to look forward to.
Yes,
Um,
it is.
and so, yeah, I love it. I'm so glad to hear that you come from, this background. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So I appreciate it so much, and it's just music has helped me a lot. Reading has helped me a lot. Like you said, they help you through some traumatic things that you experience in life, and you go on that journey, and you got to keep fighting and push through.
Yep,
And that's all you can do,
that's it.
and do it to your best.
Yes.
So that's great to hear that you went back to the school and got. I was going to say you never returned it, did you?
They told me to keep it. Because their whole system had changed. Like this they don't use that
The stamp card,
that
right?
anymore. And a lot of sadly, a lot of older books are either sold or just discarded. So I was grateful that it was still there because it probably would have been one or the other. And
Yeah.
sadly, that the idea of discarding it is like horrific to me. But sometimes expediency takes precedence, or pragmatism takes precedence over preservation. So
Yeah.
I was like, yes, thank you.
But it's a bonus that it's still got your card in there with your little initials.
Can you imagine?
That's doesn't happen much.
It does not. I have reached out to both of my librarians actually, from grade school, because this was grade school, and then um, from high school. My grade school librarian had since passed, but my high school librarian I got to speak to, which was nice because I got to thank him for for like welcoming me in his space. So because it is their space ultimately.
Yeah.
And I was there. He goes, you were a fixture. I was constantly in that library. But I was amazed, particularly like in the high school one, because they had things like H.P. Lovecraft, which you would not find in many high school libraries today. And they had they had Robert E. Howard. They had these pulp authors that had been, whose works had been put into books on the shelves, and so there was something for me to connect with at a time where I really needed that. High school is rough
Yeah.
for a lot of people. High schools, right? Especially if you're a reader, you probably tend to be more of an outsider. For some reason, it seems that way. Like if you're into the arts, you tend to be more of an outsider than from the mainstream. And so having what I consider outsider literature available, man, it was great. It was something to look forward to, because otherwise I would have completely dreaded going to school.
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
many reasons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tough. Well, even nowadays, I'm sure, I hear stories from my kids of how kids act in school now, and not to jump on that topic, but it's like, oh boy, I'm glad I'm not in there.
Right.
You know,
In
it's
some respects, I've heard it's gotten better, but I suppose it depends on where you are. I was just discussing with Rich Handley, and like his kids, their generation, the idea of like like pushing kids into lockers and like physically beating them up is not something that happens. Maybe there's more verbal abuse, but like the physical abuse seems to be a thing of the past. And I hope that's the case
yeah,
where you guys are as
yeah. It's not like that, but it's like everybody's got a phone and they'll record you doing whatever, and
well.
the destructions in the bathroom, and it's like, oh boy, vandalism. It's like, come on, guys,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Dark side of technology again,
Yeah,
like with the
man.
with the phones.
The
Yeah.
trendy stuff, do the Tide Pod challenge, which was crazy.
Yeah.
Um, oh man. So yeah, that's just great. I'm glad to hear that. That's cool. I was curious about that. That was one of my big questions for you. Was like, where did your creative mind stem from? Because that
Yeah.
journey from becoming a writer, like I think, well, I can write something. Well, I was a wizard, and then I played a dragon. Okay, but it's everything that happens that leads up to that, which is where all the creativeness comes from. And you get to from point A to point B,
Right.
what's all in the middle.
Yeah.
That's what's awesome.
It is. That's hard to even define. I don't know anyone that can like understand like really how that happens. It just happens. There is almost a mystical aspect to it. Because sometimes I'll like recently Marcel Revanchist, he goes by
Great guy.
online. So they've been doing this book club thing where they're going through supernatural encounters, and they'll sometimes read aloud passages. And so I'm watching the video, I'm like, who wrote that? Like I wrote that. Like that's I don't know where that, I don't know, like, because in your day to day like world, you don't speak that way, you don't necessarily think that way. But somehow when I sat down here, like right here where you're seeing me, to do this thing, it it came out. And so like, Tolkien speaks of like subcreation,
Mhm.
like he puts it, he actually does frame it in a spiritual context, which I think is fascinating. And like Robert E. Howard speaks about Robert E. Howard being like the creator of Conan and King Kull and Solomon Kane, for those who don't know.
The original books, right?
That's right. Yes,
Yeah.
the original before the Marvel,
Yep.
before Roy Thomas sort of like took and ran with those stories, adapting some and expanding others. Robert E. Howard would talk about how he felt like Conan was standing behind him, sort of like dictating the stories to him. And I didn't understand that until Supernatural Encounters, where it really felt that way. Like it felt like I was just capturing what they were all saying and doing. Um, which I know sounds weird, like saying it out loud, and I've said it now several times to people. It does sound weird, but that's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah, I figured it's that magical, you said it, mythical thing that just
Yeah,
happens, and that's great to hear. And Marcel is a great guy.
he
I
is.
He's a friend of mine through this.
Oh,
And
cool. Good.
I noticed the book club, and I want to watch it, but I want to read it first.
Right.
That's
Right. Yeah.
so that's really cool that he's doing that with the group of people that he's got involved there.
Oh, it's fantastic. It really is. All of this, all of you guys, all this, like being here with you, like that's amazing to me. I not something I could have imagined in a million years happening.
Yeah,
But
I didn't.
I'm very grateful and humbled by all of you guys for for wanting to talk to me about this stuff.
Well, yes, sir. I mean, you're a part of you. I mean, when I messaged you, I said I feel like I'm owning a piece of history now. for the expanded universe, because really it's true, because this was an idea from the past a little bit, right? And then it was kind of shelved, we'll say.
It
And
was.
so where did the idea for this actually start from? Like, what was the process there?
Rich Hanley and I wrote. We had kind of come up with the idea of it um, before even Star Wars Gamer began. But once that magazine dropped, Rich reached out to the editor and said, "We have this idea," because again, like my obsession, the old stuff, I don't want it to be forgotten. You know, the Marvel series, I felt it needed to have more prominence in the then current EU. And so we pitched the idea of the Marvelous Aliens, which you'll find in issue 1. And they gave us a lot of pages to work on that. And that was written in universe to sort of explore some of the races that appeared in the Marvel series. The second story was going to be cult encounters, and the third was going to be supernatural encounters. And so things happened as they do in life, and Rich wasn't able to move forward at that time. And so he basically said to me, like, well, because he had co-written Cult Encounters with me, and then Gamer sort of ceased at that point. So it was like we had the one in the bag published, we had Cult Encounters written, and Supernatural Encounters was kind of an idea in my head, really, at the time. And so that was very inchoate. So this is when was Gamer, was in the late 90s?
90s and 96, 7.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was around that time. So shelved, like you said. And then Hyperspace emerged. Now, Hyperspace was the paid portion of the official site.
Okay.
And as I mentioned earlier, I knew Pablo Hidalgo from years before he worked for Lucasfilm. We had all been just sort of like burgeoning writers wanting to, break in, or who had written stuff for West End Games. Some who hadn't gotten paid, as I mentioned. And I approached him and said, "Hey, Rich and I have this unpublished story, and I have the ideas like in my brain for Supernatural Encounters, which will explore the Marvel UK stuff, specifically like the weirder elements of Star Wars, the things that Alan Moore and Steve Moore and others too, like in West End Games and in Bantam, had touched on, but hadn't like, how does it all fit into the larger EU
scheme of things? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, because they were like there were like these name drops of things like Celestials and Architects and later on old ones that came into the vernacular with the Fate of the Jedi series specifically, but that was later. But of course, you did have Lovecraftian sort of entities and things sort of hinted at in the background, because again, like the original architects of the EU were drawing from this. So Archie Goodwin is referring to things like the Cosmic Wars and the ancient horrors, back to Behemoth from below, and like he was sort of building, like dropping seeds of things that maybe would have been developed much later down
Some
the line.
potential.
Yeah, potential, but which they never got to tell, because Marvel lost the license, and Dark Horse picked it up, and they didn't necessarily pay attention to what they were doing, what Goodwin and Thomas and Alan Dean Forster were doing, laying the groundwork for. So that's what Supernatural Encounters was really supposed to do, was look at the ancient world and what these cosmic wars were, and how Telatni and all of Woodsec and how these all fit into that. And so Pablo loved the idea, and I submitted Cult Encounters. I had to rewrite one piece because Rich felt it tonally didn't fit. He had written like a funnier vignette, And he goes, this really doesn't fit with like the darker aspects of what you're doing, which we would now call like, it's now like weird fiction is like they would call it. Some people call it cosmic horror, but whatever. They're similar terms in the vernacular. So I rewrote I wrote a new piece for it to replace the one that he felt didn't fit. Submitted that to Pablo, and then began doing research for supernatural encounters, and spent, because I had read at this point, I had read everything, but I wanted to reread a few things to really, make sure that this conception in my brain kind of fit, because I had ideas as to how to make it all fit for a long time in my head. But again, continuity is king. And research is important. It was to me. I was I was always a big complainer when other authors and editors didn't
fit.
Didn't fit. So I was determined to make sure that I wasn't somebody guilty of that. So after a period of very, very intense research, I sat down. At the time, the computer was downstairs, and I had less responsibilities, and which was afforded me time. And this thing poured out of me, just poured out in the course of like 2-3 days, almost nonstop, like bathroom breaks, food breaks, and a minor sleep break for a few hours, and then like just return to it, and just like
it just flowed, hey?
Flowed out. And then I submitted it and said, well, this is the rough draft, but there's obviously needs work. This is very, very rough. And I continued over the course of the next few years to polish and expand it. So I spoke to Pablo about that and said, until it's put on a schedule, if it's okay with you, I want to continue working on this because I feel it needs it. And he agreed to that. So I did. And then hyperspace, was taken down.
Yeah.
And so like Abel was never able to see, at least at that point, wasn't able to see Skywalker's released. And there were other authors as well that hadn't had their works released. By the way, if there are any out there listening to this, contact me and I'll make it available on StarWarsTimeline.net. So just throwing that out into the universe.
Very cool.
Because I know there were others, but Abel was able to finally get his out. So he followed the same trajectory I did, which was in around the time of the buyout, we approached Lucasfilm again and said, hey, we have these stories. Are you interested? And this was Dan and Matt of Lucasfilm, and they were absolutely interested. And it was the same thing. It was like, well, this needs work. Like, this needs work before it's ready to be seen by anybody. And they said, yeah, great, work on it, until you feel it's ready. And then we'll provide a link from the Star Wars blog to your website, which is what they did with Abel Pina's Skywalkers. And for anybody out there watching this who can't find Skywalkers, you'll find it on StarWarsTimeline.net, because Abel gave me permission to move it to my site.
So very cool.
Yeah.
Which also, I believe you have supernatural encounters on there as well, correct? From my understanding.
That's 100% correct. The PDF is there. There's a FAQ there for anybody who wants like a more detailed look at what I'm talking about right now with Steve. There's that there. There are there's a lot there. There's all the media links. So like interviews like this will be on there, along with all the others, and the analysis videos are all on there, cover gallery, all kinds of cool things.
Yeah, it's a great site. Very resourceful.
Thank you. I and then like those like fans who have written stories like spinning off of this thing, this like massive tone, like I want to put them on there as well, so that there's a home for that, because a lot of people said, "Oh, I want to take this and run with it," and I'm like that. That was kind of also like the whole point of this was to expand the universe further,
Yeah.
because again, as far as I'm concerned, it's still a living, breathing universe. So all I've done was go back in time, to those tens of thousands of years. And the galaxy is massive. I mean, and then there are satellite galaxies, so that it's a huge, huge place to play in.
I was just gonna say, yep, it's a big puzzle.
It's a huge puzzle, so there's room for everybody, to like stake their tent and to just have fun and run with it. So that was the goal, was to expand it further, so that all of you guys, all of you listeners, however you want to play in that world, whether it is fan fiction or costuming or role-playing games, like, you've got more now,
More to work with.
there's
More the
so
better.
much more, yeah, than there had been. There was already a ton, like there's already. So now there's, as you'll see when you get into it, there's just so much more to have fun with, if you want to go into the layers, or even if you don't want to. On a surface level, there's just a ton. The cosmic wars were broken up into three wars: the Empyrean Wars, the War of Temporal Planes, and the Twilight Wars. And so these span epochs of time, and they all have distinctive features in them. So there's enough to not fill out, but to give you as a reader a sense of what was going on during that period, but not so much that it's crowded. In fact, it's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what could be.
Yeah.
So that was it. So that basically was to give fans more room to play in.
That's awesome.
Thank
And
you.
who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want that? And I mean, I love, like, you go, like, I'm really truly am excited to read this, not just because I'm talking to you. I mean, going back and digging into stuff, and you picked up on these little tidbits here and there, and you can run with it.
Yeah.
And that's what you did. And now, like, I like the old stuff. I like, that's just, yeah.
Thanks. That's how I felt too.
Yeah. So this just flowed out of you. And when did you actually restart working on this? Like,
I twice. So in so there was those two kind of periods there, and there might have been like an interim period too, but so initially in 2008, 2009, so initially for Hyperspace, and then when Hyperspace was canceled, I you always have hope, but you have to move on, because I'm a working writer, so I had to pursue other projects. And that was pretty much when I started working on the Black Sabbath books, was at that time, which was great, because that was a whole other, like, a lot of research with that.
I could imagine.
But then in 2014, when I spoke to Dan and Matt, that was like the kind of restarting it again. And I sent out like a beta version to a few readers to say, all right, well, what do you guys think? Like, what do you think it needs? Where would you go? What should be developed? What shouldn't be? I wanted to get a sense of it. And then I released the beta version. And so 2014 happened, and then a year passed, and there were rumblings coming down the line, as that Lucasfilm was basically told that their focus was going to be on the new canon. And so it was like,
Yeah, everybody.
I think I know what this means. So I wrote, Matt and Dan wanted me to write an intro for the blog, which would feature the link. The story still wasn't ready, but I wrote to them again. I had finished the intro, and I did get the sense at that time that Legends was not something that was going to be pursued. And don't get me wrong, I'm not quoting them or saying anything, that they had said. It was just a feeling. But again, as with the 2009 or 2000, with the hyperspace situation, when hyperspace was canceled, the story was never canceled. It was the same with Skywalkers. We never received cancellations, and this was the same thing too in 2015. Nothing was canceled. It was just kind of put back in limbo again.
Mm.
So I didn't want to wait another. I didn't want to wait another 10 years, or 15 years to. I was already in the midst of working on it, and I wanted to complete it, but I didn't know if there really would be interest, amongst the fans. I mean, because this is like real obscure, like corners of the universe, and tonally, it's written in a pulp style, so it's also it's not modern in any way, shape, or form in terms of like how modern literature is written. It is very much a product of something that you could have read in the 1930s or the 1920s, and that was by design. It's also like my natural way of writing, which is, because that's what I read. It's like,
Yeah, well,
yeah,
that's
so
what
what
really
comes
got you.
out. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Um,
it makes sense.
it does. Thank you for saying that. So I put out the beta version online on my site just to gauge, is anybody going to be interested in this? And I got a lot of positive feedback. So I figured, all right, well, there's enough interest to kind of pursue this. Um, and then, some new editors came on board, because I needed, like, for example, like with the Sith, I hadn't played Tor. I hadn't played the KOTOR games. I mean, I knew about them. I watched all the videos, the playthroughs, and I read as much as I could. Obviously, all the comics and books, but it's still not the same as having firsthand knowledge. So I brought on two guys who were like hardcore Sith, you know, knowledgeable fans, like really, really, which was Edward Dodds and Ryan Shepard. So they were great at helping me, make sure that everything, fit the way it's supposed to fit, because there's a lot of twists and turns with Sith history.
Oh yeah.
But so you really need it. You have to, you have to talk to people that are on top of these things. And that's an old EU tradition. Like Anne Crispin, when she wrote her Han Solo trilogy, she had a bunch of people that she spoke to that were fans, like Mike Beidler and Rich Hanley and other. Well, Rich was writing at that time, but other fans that maybe weren't authors that were helping her with obscure lore, all of which she incorporated in her books. So so that was super helpful. And I brought other editors on board, like Kyle and Patrick and Harry and Robert and Neil and Michael and it was a team.
Oh, but I was gonna say it's a group or it's a team.
It was a team, and then fans would write me and say, don't forget this, like the Bando Gora, and like a lot of that lore is in the game, and blah blah blah. So that was fantastic. And don't forget, like Star Wars, there were crossovers, here, and here, and it was beautiful because you do forget. Your brain can only hold so much. So, and as immersed as you are in it, there's always like corners that other fans are interested in, and they want to, they want you to know that these things, are out there. So Albin Leloup, who did the translation for me of the Casus Belli issue, which featured Darth Dreadwar, who was a major player in the story. You'll see in book 6 is really where he kind of comes to the fore. And he played an important role with the Exiles. So having that issue translated completely, because I had like a page or 2 or 3, but I didn't have the whole thing. So he sent me the whole thing. So it's a community effort, really, that went into it. It takes a tribe. You know that expression? Like,
Yeah.
It does. It takes a tribe. So that was tremendous, and I was able to bring it to where it needed to be. and that's why it also like took so long, and then because there's a lot of lore, and I like to look at everything and then re-look at it again. So did I get this right? Am I remembering this right? Am I interpreting this right?
Yeah, well, that's good though. That's you. That's what makes you you, right? Because why half-ass it?
I agree. I agree. You can't. Why do it if you're gonna half-ass it? Don't why do it? I understand, like for working writers, they're brought onto something and they have. And this is unfortunate because we do rag on we as fans we tend to rag on writers who do seem to half-ass it at times, but they're given sometimes very short deadlines.
Yeah.
They don't have the luxury of time that you guys all gave me. You gave me this luxury of time, and it actually was kind of fortunate in a way that Lucasfilm put it into limbo, because had they imposed a hard and fast deadline, I wouldn't have had the time to do the as in-depth work
Yeah.
that I was able to do, and it was it was a lot. The ancient Sith and the immortal gods of the Sith. That some of that stuff was like a year long research, and some of it even longer. Like the history of humans in the galaxy, something I really labored over. I mean, this was and I say work. It was like head work. It was like a lot of preparation and rewriting and change conceptions to make sure it was all right. So, but I am more sympathetic now to
To
writers,
writers.
because who are working with these short deadlines, and they just don't have, even if they want to, or their heart's in the right place. And I want to give them all the benefit of the doubt and say that their heart is in the right place. Maybe not all.
Yeah.
Brian, yeah, Brian Wood bragged, which was I felt a misstep on his part. He bragged about how he didn't have to do any research, and he just watched the film and wrote this series. This was the Star Wars 2013 series or 2012 series that Dark Horse put out, just called Star Wars. And that was unfortunate. That felt like a soft reboot to a lot
Mm.
of fans, reading it like, oh,
What is this?
nobody, no, yeah, like who's at the wheel here? Like what's going on? And so it doesn't work. It doesn't work in the new canon. It doesn't work. It
Yeah.
doesn't fit into the old canon. So that was a case where it was like he was a big name, and a Dark Horse felt that would draw in new readers, but it alienated a lot of old readers.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the deadline thing, and that's unfortunate that it's kind of like one of those necessary evils depending on who you're working for.
Yeah,
Or right. It's kind of
100%.
it's a bummer.
It is. Then again, look at Sean Stewart. Like, so he replaced William Dietz, who did Escape from Dagu, and he replaced it with Yoda Dark Rendezvous, which to me is like, it may be my favorite, like my all-time favorite EU book. Like, I think it's that good.
Really? Yeah, it's good.
Um,
It's good. Yeah.
yeah, it's really good, and I had the chance to tell him that, which I was grateful for because he was at Legends Con,
Yep.
and so we it was nice. We had a chance to talk at length, and I was able to tell him, like, look, I think this is not only a great Star Wars book, but I think this is great literature. And he was very appreciative to hear that, because he didn't know that he didn't know that there were fans out there
Oh
he just,
man.
yeah, nobody told, Lucasfilm didn't tell him, and he wasn't invited back to do more, which is usually the indication that, oh, your work is well received and we want
We're
you to
gonna
do more.
yeah.
And it always puzzled me that they didn't bring him back, because what he did in this short, you were speaking about short deadlines, this really short deadline, to me, it was magnificent. Um, it just blows my mind every time I read it. So
I'm always curious why they didn't bring some of the writers on to the new canon.
yeah,
You know, because there's a lot of great authors.
There's a lot. Yeah, there was a lot. We've lost a lot, not to interject a sad note, but,
Right.
just to be real, like we've lost in recent years, it seems so many. Dave Wolverton and Tom Veach and I know I'm forgetting.
Yeah, there was somebody recently too.
And Crispin had passed several years ago, and it just it seems like that's
Michael Reeves.
Michael Reeves. Another author I loved.
Mhm.
Another author who he snuck in so many crossovers, and because Michael Reeves has a long history in animation, in Western animation,
Mm.
particularly, and he all those references he snuck in there. So like if you're old enough and you remember the cartoon Black Star from about 1981, space opera series, and it only ran the one season. It was so good, and he was one of the co-writers on it. And he put Black Star references, like direct, explicit references, into his books. I mean, he references Xenomorph from Alien, which also appeared in the X-Wing, one of the X-Wing comics. Like you see a Xenomorph walking around in a crowd, which is hilarious. I love that. I love when authors get playful like that and like sneak in these things. That was something I really ran with as well. So there's a lot of that.
Oh, good. That's good to know.
You can take it or leave it as your taste dictates. You
Sure.
can look at these things like we look at them and say, oh, it's just a playful, it doesn't mean anything. You could take it on that completely surface level, or you can go as deep as you want with it, as some fans have, and say, this means that these universes are connected. How? And that was the question that I set out to answer, was how. If you want to see it as that, and if you don't, that's okay too. You have an out. So every fan has that opportunity to determine for his or herself how they wish to view this thing.
Sure.
I myself have different interpretations, as to what it means and how it means. But my idea was how to make it work was the goal with this thing, which is another reason that this book is as long as it is.
Yeah, but it's like I got to show it off. I'm gonna show it off again because I'm still impressed. It's just this. I got this, and even the art. The art in here is great. Is that a good? Can you see that good?
That's gorgeous. That's so for people who don't know, that's from the Ewoks animated series. And that was Guillaume Ducos. Thank you. Yeah, the artists were amazing. Chris Cole just got interviewed by Brennan and Marcel.
Oh, really?
It was amazing because he remembered a lot of things that even I'd forgotten, which is super cool.
I was gonna.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna mention that because on the bottom it's got the illustrated by Chris Cole, but Mr. Ducos, I believe. I don't know how to pronounce his first name.
Guillaume Ducos.
Guillaume Ducos. Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to give them a shout out.
Fantastic guys. I loved working with them. It's one of the joys when you find an artist who's also like a nice person. Like you can you bounce off of each other. And let me tell you, these guys, they're like mind readers. Like I would give them direction and sometimes references from different sources, across the EU or even outside of the EU at times.
Sure.
But they would sometimes just read my mind, or sometimes I would send them like a paragraph or a few paragraphs. It's like what they would come up with was better than even what I had envisioned, which is such a cool, it's a cool thing because it's like coming to life there before your eyes. But that particular cover is like a more realistic view of the season deities from the old Ewoks animated series, because that's EU. And yes, that series was geared for kids, and for little kids, but it doesn't mean the stories aren't valid.
Right.
Again, so that question of how, well, how how would those stories fit in an adult EU, context? Um, wasn't hard. It really, so that, like, that illustration is sort of indicative of that. Like, uh where you see the seasoned deities as they would look in a more realistic form, as opposed to how they were depicted in the cartoon, where they look a little silly.
Yeah. Well, but it was for kids, but we
But it
can
was for
take it
kids.
and the story, right?
So that's just it. It's about, rather than just dismissing, because that was like the approach of, again, my generation versus like your generation, or the ones that came after me. My generation was more about, like, oh, that's crap. They would just dismiss it, like, and that was it. Um, Minimalist. The maximalist approach, which is, no, this is all EU, and there's a lot of great lore in those cartoons. If you've never seen them, and the droids as well,
And they're classics.
they're classics. They're really, really cool. And once you get past that, and that's what the idea was with putting Ewoks stuff into the book too, was to elevate the material so that fans could appreciate it more.
Yeah.
Um, and I've seen people say, no, nothing's gonna make me, like, watch those cartoons, but hopefully, if anything, will, like, this will. Because they do have fans. I
They
have
do.
spoken to people in other countries, like my friend Thomas Rathowski, who actually helped translate some German Ewoks comic books that were never reprinted here in the US.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I will be releasing those sometime in the coming year. So, like I said, as I'm saying, like, the EU is not, by no means is the EU dead. There are still things to look forward to. There are still things coming. We have 4 Han Solo books, that were accepted as canonical by their authors and by the fans in Hungary, which I think, and they fit beautifully into, current EU canon. So the EU is alive and well, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
And so it's just about giving this older material, this maybe forgotten material, a new lease on life, um, so that they can be recontextualized and then enjoyed by a new generation. Because there were those of an old generation who loved these things. And if you're one of them, now there's more of it. And if you didn't like them, well, maybe now you can appreciate them in a way that you weren't able to earlier, because they had been so geared for younger
For you.
audiences.
Yeah. Yeah, you like mentioning how it, like the cartoons. I mean, there's the whole comic book thing too. There was an epic collection omnibus of the Droids and Ewok comic
Yep.
books. That was fantastic. And
Oh,
even
glad you liked them.
yeah,
Yeah.
and when Nick and I spoke, we talked a little bit about Jude Watson and how she wrote, like she had that slew of the Jedi Apprentice that were like the scholastic young reader kids books. Like I remember, in grade school, but they came out as like almost like a young adult, like the style of how they were, written was just phenomenal.
Absolutely phenomenal. To me, she's one of the great unsung heroes of the EU. Uh, right? I mean,
Yeah,
her stuff is phenomenal. Um, and I never felt, and she was very smart in the way she wrote it, because she never wrote down to kids,
right.
or to young adults. She never wrote down, and that is the way to do it. Uh, so even if you read classic children's literature, going back to, say, Tolkien, or going back even further to like L. Frank Baum, they also never wrote down to kids. They wrote like as if they were on an equal
Yeah,
plane.
perfect way to say it.
Yeah, and sometimes even above it a bit. And I think that's kids appreciate that, and then older readers can read it and also appreciate it. And that is a difference from like the Hollis David series, which maybe is written a bit down to kids, and still tremendous fun. You know, the Glove of Darth Vader, like
Yeah, well, it's still, they have their place. Yeah.
yeah. Um, you know, so there's a contrast between those two things. I love it all, so I don't care. I
Have
don't.
you read it all?
I've read it all. Sometimes many times.
Many times. Yeah.
Like the Jude Watson series. I've definitely read at least twice. Hollis David series 2 or 3 times. All the old stuff, like all the pre-Zon EU stuff, 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's something different about it, right? It's got a different. It's just different. But I'm not saying that in a negative tone.
Not at all. Yeah, different, equal but different. That's a good way of putting it. It's not a judgment thing. They are different styles. Like Zon brings in a much more straightforward science fiction sort of feel. And I think that may, because his were the first and the most well received amongst fans, that may be where, you know, Kevin Anderson and Vonda McIntyre and others struggled a bit. Fans of the EU at that time struggled a bit with their works because they veered more towards a fantasy space opera style than Zahn had, or Stackpole had. Stackpole was doing more military fiction with the X-Wing books. And so, you know, fans are this way. We like this. We want more of it. You know, they don't necessarily appreciate experimentation so much. And you see this with artists, like bands struggle with this, you know, like they don't want to be pigeonholed. They don't necessarily want to be stuck in one mode. But if they progress too far too fast,
they get nobody have a bunch of backlash.
Yes,
you're a sellout.
Exactly, tremendously. But if you go back like pre-80s with music, that it was actually expected that bands would do that. So, you know, we were talking about Sabbath earlier. Like each album has a definite progression from the one previously.
Absolutely.
And it's still all like heavy rock mixed in with softer elements, which was present right from the first album. There was always that light and shadow, you know, interplay with their music. But they each album progressed and went in different directions and incorporated all kinds of musical styles and things. Not, you know, like, but then you have a band like Queen, which went, for many fans, a step too far into disco, which was perceived as a diametric opposite of what rock music is.
Yeah.
So they bled a lot of fans because they weren't going to follow. They just weren't going to follow them there. It's fascinating. That whole thing is fascinating, and you know, you see it with fans. And again, I think we're back to a generation that is open to experimentation and to different things because they like that. They like different styles. They're used to that.
Yeah, and it's good to do that too. But you're right, for a certain period of time, you know, a big example for, you know, Metallica when they came out with the Black Album. Holy crap, they were sellouts, and it was everybody's burn. I remember watching it on VH1 and MTV, people burning their CDs. It's like, what?
You know, Metallica kind of had a struggle because even from the Ride the Lightning album, from Kill 'Em All, there were fans calling them sellouts, which is, to me, is bizarre. Like I find that very strange because Ride the Lightning is a progression from Kill 'Em All, and Master of Puppets is a progression from Ride the Lightning. I never understood that.
No.
But you do have very purist kinds of fans. And again, it's like, we like this, we want more of it. But of course, like if you duplicate that exactly, then there's complaints that
It's
you're
stagnant.
just right. You're being derivative.
Mhm.
So it's a damned if I do, damned if I don't situation. It's a fine line to walk when you're an artist in any way, shape, or form.
It is. That's a good point. There's the one band that I will say that bothered me when um they changed lead vocalist was the Misfits when Glenn
Oh
Danzig left.
yeah, I could see that.
That
Yeah,
I just like Glenn Danzig and how the Misfits started and their whole thing, like his vocalist, everything fit with that for me.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Like that's really the
absolutely.
only band that I've ever really was like, oh, I would like Heaven and Hell when we were talking about Black Sabbath with Ronnie James Dio.
Yeah.
Phenomenal singer. His
Yep.
own music was great.
Yep.
He's got that more fantasy vibe feel to him, right?
Yep.
Great album. But it's not the same to me as when Ozzy was, in the original.
Yeah, I've gotten in trouble for pointing pointing that out. To because to some fans who want to say, oh no, the Iommi is Sabbath. I love Iommi. He's my favorite guitarist, but I don't believe that. I believe that that second band was a different band. And we can argue whether you like it more or less or whatever. It was different. And that band should have been called Heaven and Hell right in 1980, and then you wouldn't have had all this needless fighting between fans and amongst fans, which the only reason that original name was kept was for marketing purposes, and it wasn't even something the band wanted. That was something the managers and the record companies wanted.
It's all about the money.
It's all about that, and that was same was true when the Born Again album came. When Ian Gillan joined from Deep Purple, again that was supposed to be a different name for the band. So it's important because people identify with this thing, especially when a band is as old as 10 years. You've got 10 years on you, and you invest in that sound. In that there is a special chemistry that cannot be replicated when you change one member. And it's so funny. I just read an article with Ozzy where he admitted the 13 album to him is not a Black Sabbath album because Bill wasn't there. And that's hilarious because that's very different from what he was saying at the time.
Well, it's Ozzy.
That's Ozzy, but it is hilarious to me. And just artists in general struggle to maintain to grow because you have to grow.
Yeah.
I just think it's important that you grow and you try different things. And not every experiment's going to work, and it's not going to be for everybody, but you do have to try at least.
You got to try.
You're not being true to your own creative, impulses. I wrote, as a writer, so, for example, to bring it back to Star Wars for a minute, when I wrote because I had written several stories for hyperspace, not just supernatural encounters. The next one I wrote, I went in a completely different stylistic direction. I released it on the Discord server, but it was basically about Lady Tarkin. It was her story. Sorry about that.
No, and we got a guest. That's all right,
Roscoe. And I wanted to work in that style because I felt that that's how that story needed to be written. It had to have a different style. And whether that works or not is, again, that's up to the reader. But to force an artist to remain in the same bag, is too much of an imposition. I feel on the part of fans, to be like to keep them. No, like I'm going to reject you if you dare to step outside of this.
Outside that line.
Yeah.
Shame on you.
That's yeah.
Well, yeah.
But
You
again,
wrote.
Yeah, sorry, go
I
ahead.
was gonna say, yeah, you wrote a few other articles. Like you were doing articles for the Gamer and Meg Insider and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is great, But you got to try, like you said, you have to try to see.
Yeah, that's the bottom line, is to keep trying and to keep pushing forward. And the EU is so beautiful in that, and this is true for space opera as a genre. It's got room for every kind of story under the sun. For like we said, military fiction, like Mike Stackpole was doing with the X-Wing books. Straight on serious science fiction, like Tim Zahn was doing. Weirder stuff, like Alan Moore was doing. Like that's like outright weird fiction. Horror, like the Death Troopers, book had pursued.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love
yeah,
I
that was
love Joe Schreiber. He's another good author.
me too. I never understood the criticism that Red Harvest got. Have you read that one?
Oh, I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah, me too. I remember fans complaining about it, and so when I read it, I kept waiting to come to the part where, oh, this horrible thing was going to happen, and I got to the end of the book. I'm like, this is a great book.
Uh,
Why are we complaining?
yeah, I never understood why people didn't really. I don't know. I got in touch with him.
Oh, you did?
I did. It was harder than hell, but I finally did, and he got back to me. But he's not interested in, like, it was nothing negative. He was really cool. We had like a little conversation, but he was just not up for doing interviews anymore.
At all, or just in regards to
Yeah,
Star Wars?
as far as I know in regards to Star Wars.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear it. I wonder if he had a bad experience,
Yeah, I don't know.
either with fans or with Lucasfilm. Like, I know Karen Travis won't, have anything to do with Star
Oh
Wars
yeah,
anymore. Um,
some of her novels I really enjoyed, like Wild Space and stuff. Or which one did she? Yeah, she did Wild Space, I believe, right?
that's Karen Miller.
Karen Miller. Karen Travis
Very,
did.
very
Oh,
nice
she
woman.
did the
Yeah,
Republic Commando. I haven't got
that's
there
right.
yet. Yeah.
Karen Miller is also Karen Miller. I'm going to get in trouble, but unlike Karen Travis, Karen Miller is super sweet. We've spoken on the phone several times, and very, very nice person. Um, I met Karen Travis and we spoke, but she was hard to get along with. And I didn't understand why, because I was nothing but kind
Yeah,
and
you're a gentleman and a
praising
scholar,
her
in
work.
my
Thank
opinion.
you, thank you. I don't know. I don't know what that was all about. But you know what? It doesn't take away anything from her work. I
Right.
still love her work. I don't care about, necessarily that she wasn't as nice to me, because I don't take these things personally. You know. She had bad experiences, and it whatever the case was, who knows? Who cares?
Yeah.
The bottom line is her stories were fun. They're good. I wish she had continued them.
Yeah, I haven't read the Republic Commando stuff yet, but it's on the list. It's on the
Nice.
ever-growing list.
I'm so envious of you, man. I wish I can go back in time and read these as if they were like new, because they're amazing. Like, the vast majority are really, really good. And this is why I'm saying earlier about, like, different styles, like, so, and why EU critics oftentimes have either read nothing or they've read a few things and maybe didn't like them, those few things. And I always say, like, if you've got an open mind, so we'll read further, like, read other authors, because maybe those things will click with you.
I'll grab you, right?
Because you know from 1977, to the present day, the idea that it should all just be one thing exactly, that with no deviation, that's A, boring, B, the films don't even do that.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
there are strong tonal differences from A New Hope to Empire Strikes Back to Return of the Jedi to the prequels. And even the prequels each have tonal differences to them. I don't understand this idea that everything should be just this. So, and this kind of like is kind of what we were talking about earlier. But on the positive side of it is like, all right, so if you don't like this particular thing, so you read Jedi Trial and you didn't like it, read the next book.
Yeah, move on.
Move on, because
There's a
that one
lot there.
is a lot. I love the variety. I love the diversity of voices
Yeah.
that now that exists, and the diversity of styles. And that is what space opera is. I cannot stress this enough. Now that I've had the opportunity to really do a deep dive, into the beginnings of it, so let's say from the 1910s through to the 1940s.
Yeah.
This is what space opera was from a literary perspective. It had such a wide range of styles, and it didn't hem itself into rules, in terms of what it
Yeah,
could be.
limitless.
Limitless. And that's a beautiful thing for any literary genre. And it's so funny to me because space opera is the most maligned of all the genres.
Yeah.
And from science fiction fans predominantly, like hard science fiction fans.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't follow the rules of science fiction. But what I postulate is that it's not according to Gernsback and Campbell, like the two main guys who first named what science fiction was, started science fiction clubs, had these magazines that reprinted science fiction and put new science fiction that was just that genre. So Gernsback essentially created the genre, and Campbell refined it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they were really down on space opera, even though they had written it, some of it like years earlier. It does not follow their rules. It never has, and it never will. Because, and this is what I postulate, and I discussed this with Barbara Hambley at Legends Con, I think space opera is its own genre. It's its own thing. It has its own traditions. What influenced it is very different from what influenced and what the goals of science fiction are. So let's treat them as separate, and let's stop dunking on each other. Like you guys are in your lane, enjoy it, man. It's wonderful for what it is, but we're in this lane, and sometimes they can cross and sometimes not. But rather than taking this adversarial approach, let's let it be its own thing, and we can enjoy it for what it is, and you can enjoy your thing for what that is.
Beautifully said. There's
Thank
perimeters.
You. Yeah.
Let's play the game and stay in bounds, or like you said, cross lanes. Don't beat the horn and give me the finger. Let's just keep on trucking.
That's it. That's fantastic. I love that. I love that. Amen.
Yes. Yes, sir. Could you got a little bit of time yet? Like,
Sure.
you're okay? Would you mind if we took a pee break? I can edit this out. It's just my eyes are floating, sir.
Let's do it. Yeah.
And I'm really enjoying talking with you. So
beautiful. All right.
I'll be right back.
Me too. I'll do the same.
They're probably like, Dan, you've been in there for a while.
They're probably hungry.
Get out of here. Yeah. I'm just having a blast chatting with you.
Me too.
My kids upstairs were like, you done yet? I'm like, no, we're having a great time. You guys get spoiled all the time. Let me be for a little while. We were making lasagna. My dad's birthday's coming up, so my wife and I, she's got this recipe for lasagna that she's like, I'll pay you to make it, so we make it for him every so often. Well, she does. She's the cook. I'm the griller. I like to do the grilling outside.
They're both an art form.
It's true.
They really are. True. And cooking's hard. I can't quite do it myself, but I see you really you have to know like the right amounts, and oftentimes you have to feel what works, like what's going to taste good and what isn't. I love it. My grandmother was the big cook.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she was Italian, so it was like always like an Italian feast.
Oh yeah. The Italians eat pretty good from my understanding.
Man. A little too good.
Yeah.
You know?
Hey, food is a good quality of life and enjoy it, right?
Beautifully said.
Yes.
I agree.
Yep. Oh, so oh, I'm, I've now I kind of forgot where we left off now. You're very knowledgeable, and I'm just like I'm just in shock and awe listening to you. I truly am.
Thank you.
It's just a pleasure. It's truly an honor to talk with you, sir.
I appreciate it. The honor is mine, truly, because you're so easy to talk to. Not everybody is. Not everyone. You put the people you talk to at ease because your kindness and your gentle nature really just come through. Um, and that's rare in the world.
Well, I appreciate that.
So
Thank you.
yeah,
That's what I
absolutely.
try. I'm like we mentioned earlier. There's good people. We need good people in the world. I mean,
We really do.
let's just all get along, and everything will be okay.
Ah, man, you said it.
Seriously,
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Let's stop fighting each other
right?
already. Yeah,
We've done that for years upon years upon years.
it hasn't helped. It never
No,
helped.
never. No, no. What's the outcome? It's always the good book says it.
I agree. That good book was an influence too on supernatural encounters in many respects.
Really
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
I like when that stuff kind of gets entangled with that. The Sword of Truth series, like I mentioned earlier.
yeah.
I feel like there's influences in there, like biblical, like prophecies and things, because that nature is in the book. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's just I highly recommend it. It's a good read. Well, they're long books, but it's worth it.
How long is the series? Like, how many books are in the series?
I believe it's 13 total.
Oh, all right. That's reasonable.
I mean, yeah, but they're like 800, 900 pagers. So I mean, but I've read the first two, and I'll tell you what, there was never a dull moment for me. Like
Okay,
it's just the story just keeps you enticed.
that's what you want.
And that's I was going to ask you, like, so I mean every writer, author, journalist, however you want to slice and dice it, that's the outcome is you want to be able to have that connection with the reader. Like you
Yeah.
want them to be like, man, this is a good. And so far, from what I've heard of supernatural encounters, it's received very well.
I'm grateful to hear it.
Yeah, I like I said, I don't want to get spoilers because we talked about it, that experience. Like you said, oh, you envy me, which that's a great word. I just recently learned I'm gonna be 40, but like jealousy and envy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Jealousy. I've said that word to people. Well, I'm jealous of you. Now that I've learned, it's like, no, I'm not jealous of you. I don't want you not to have that.
Right.
I want to be able to have that with you.
Yeah.
So I envy you for that.
Yes.
And I
That's
love that.
great distinction.
So
Well, yeah.
being able to read things for the first time is I don't know. I'm just for the last, when I got my health issue happened a couple years ago, I went back to reading. Like that really helped me. Like
Yeah.
that brought me back from the dark side.
I
Um
do.
and Star Wars was a big part of that. So
I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad
I
it was there for you. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it was put in your path to help you
yes.
to rise above.
Yeah. Because as a kid, I liked it and it was like safe, and the outcome of Star Wars was always positive, or
Yeah.
in the family, and it was good. It's a good thing. So I mean, I prefer reading books now than watching TV. Honestly,
Yeah. Many people have said that to me of late, like, "Oh, I'd rather read a book than watch
yeah.
television."
I was home yesterday. The wife and kids went to a little corn maze, and I was home for a while by myself. And just did some jamming. I like to listen to music, and I like to listen to it loud. And when the house is myself, I do that. And then I stopped doing that, and I went and read.
Mm.
That's it. And it was, I love it.
Ah, that's a good day. That's a
Very
good
good
day.
day.
Tunes, books, you know.
Yeah, it's really, it's awesome. So, we talked about the Sabbath and you're a big fan and you have a great knowledge base of them. What other artists or styles of music are you into?
um, Although while metal was sort of my first love, or proto metal, depending on how you want to define, um, Sabbath and that sort of like the '70s, like sort of like heavy rock bands. I I also actually I have a strong affinity for folk. Both, yeah, like going back to like like '60s folk.
Mm.
Um, like Simon and Garfunkel, um, Peter, Paul, and Mary. Because I appreciate like there's something that was, I think, the first song that I think I remember, because we had a music class in grade school, and our teacher was great because she played classical music and romantic music, and she kind of went chronologically, because I like chronologies. She went chronologically down the line, and when she got to the modern music, she played Scarborough Fair from Simon and Garfunkel, and that was the first time I felt the power of music. It's funny how some people say, "Oh, well, but you play classical music and like, you didn't feel it then." I didn't. I mean,
Yeah.
and I appreciate classical music more now. Um, Classical, by the way, in the broader sense, which incorporates the different eras. Um, but then I didn't. Then it was that song that drew me. I was like, "Oh, this is what music can make you feel like." So
Powerful.
in a sense, maybe that was my first love, actually, was folk. And I do like modern indie slash folk has elements of that. And I like it when artists have something to say about, you know, the world we live in and life in general, which is a lyric to a song from from somewhere. Um, to me, but in any case, I feel like that I like the sort of like the authenticity that comes with that kind of music.
Yeah.
And classic rock to some degree as well. I got burned out on some of it because of commercial rock radio,
Hmm. So my
which
dad says the same thing.
the same songs again and again and again, and you just enough already. Um, but yeah, I try to keep an open mind. I listen to soundtracks a lot when when I when writing this book. It's funny because Chris Cole was talking about if he listens to music while he's working, and he kind of said he hit upon something that I had never thought about before, but it's also sort of what I did. So if I wanted to get into a zone, I would play either a soundtrack or instrumental music. So like the genre of like post rock is very instrumental. And there's like krautrock and Italian, like prog rock tends to have instrumentals, but and there's other elements too. But if I'm more in a like I don't have a lot of time to work and I need to quickly focus and get into it, then I'll kind of go like full, like balls to the
But
walls metal. Then it's like
yeah.
then I'm playing Celtic Frost. Then I'm playing Manowar. Then I'm playing
Oh,
like I'm going for like the
you're
really
going into it.
I'm going into it because I need to block out the world. Like
Yep.
right now, there's a cat crying at the door. Like that would be distracting to me if I didn't have music on. So, or I could just let him in the room. I mean, that's another option too. But these are like very vocal cats, the four of them.
It's funny you say that about the music and when you work. I know when I was going in school and doing homework, I would put my headphones on, the tape deck, or then eventually I got a little portable CD player. But I
Yeah,
would work better listening. Like I would get a better grade on the assignment. Have had the music playing.
that's it. Not
That's
not, not everyone can do that, but that worked for you.
yeah.
Teachers should encourage students to find what works for them. Because for some of us, like it's like absolute silence doesn't work. For some people, it does. So, music absolutely can kind of just drown out everything else, put you in a zone, and allow you to do what you need to do.
All the time, 100%.
Yeah.
Even at work, even if you're working, in a trade or whatever, depending on the music. Like you said, if you throw on the heavy stuff, you got Judas Priest playing or Diamond Head or whatever, but then there's also room for the other genres, depending on the mood, like soundtracks. Now, in my opinion, I love John Williams and the Star Wars soundtrack, but to me, the Lord of the Rings soundtrack,
oh yeah,
is just amazing.
It really is. It's absolutely amazing. The new Rings of Power soundtrack is also excellent. I think it's on par with Howard Shore's. Although Howard Shore does do a piece on the new one. So I was grateful. For that. Any new soundtrack I could find that the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack is phenomenal. The old from 1981, the heavy metal soundtrack.
From the movie.
Elmer Bernstein. Yeah, I love that movie. You'll see references in Supernatural Encounter to that. But I played that soundtrack a lot. It's got I think some of the best fantasy music I've ever heard, particularly in the latter section, the Tarna's theme. Elmer Bernstein was another genius, like Howard Shore, like John Williams. I love. I'm very picky too. Like I'll make playlists because sometimes a song, like if you're listening to a band, like a song could take you out of your headspace too. If it's So I've made hours long playlists that I can easily just sort of plug in. Like click on this spot, click on this, but I can click anywhere on it, play it, and I'm good. Like again, depending on the mood that I'm in, because I know how I've arranged it. It's so crazy. It's like these techniques that we go through.
Oh, I know. When I used to run, I would, because obviously music can inspire you and push you, but it can also give you that extra gear that you're missing.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so on a long run, you've got that playlist, you know what song to hit, and then boom, you got a bunch of jet fuel in you and you're going again. It's crazy how it can do that to you, but it's so amazing.
Do you have nice trails down where you are?
Yeah, there's some, we kind of live in the upper peninsula part of Wisconsin. So we're like right on. Michigan is just a hop, skip, and a jump away, just a little bridge. And then we're in Michigan. But farther up north, there's a lot of beautiful trails and great scenery. If you Google pictured rocks in Michigan, I mean, it's a sight to see.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
They have, it's great. It's beautiful up here and peaceful.
Oh yeah. That's what I want.
You'd love it.
Yeah, I really would.
Yeah.
I've been where I am now, which is on Long Island in New York for, well, nearly my entire life. And so I'm ready for what you just described, like that. Right there. Peace, nature.
That's what you got here. Wilderness. It's great.
Ooh, all right.
We live on the Great Lakes, so that's something to be, That's not everybody has something like that.
Is it colder year round than?
Yeah, well, it's starting to get cold today. It's well, yesterday it was 43 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so and
Yeah,
today it's
that's good.
50.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah, it
that's good.
dropped. It dropped off. Yeah, winters. We get in the negative temperatures here quite a bit, but you get used to it though.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like it. You're probably like, well, I don't think I'll ever get used to something like that, Steve. I'll tell you what.
As
But
as I get older, I grow less tolerant of the cold, it seems. Um, I don't know why that is, but I know some people love it. Like some people do, they prefer the cold, and some people prefer the heat. I kind of like it in between
in the
the two.
middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I don't honestly. I'm getting tired of the cold too, but it's just the summers here are good. The
Yeah.
location's good.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of crime or nothing like that happens here. It's it's a great. I'm fortunate, really.
Oh, I'm glad to
It's
hear it. Yeah.
yeah,
You take the good with the bad because there's not going to be any perfect place.
right.
It doesn't
Just
exist. So
like
yeah,
the end of the world extremists. You can't hide from. There's nowhere to go.
right. So yeah. So be great. That spirit of gratitude, I think is important.
Yeah,
Because if you don't have it, then instead, what do you have instead is a complaining spirit, and then you're never happy. Nothing makes you happy because you're focused on
the negative.
the negative. And remember Qui-Gon's line in The Phantom Menace where he says to Obi-Wan, "Your focus determines your reality." So focus on the positive, and your reality will be more positive.
Yeah, that's absolutely. The mind is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
It really is. I'm actually listening to it on an audiobook at work, but it's oh no, it just slipped my darn mind.
Hmm.
The mind leaves images, or how the body, and it's about the mind and the body, and how everything is connected, and how your brain can rewire itself, basically.
Yeah,
It's interesting. It's really deep stuff. I'm into that kind of stuff too,
that's
Um,
cool. Yeah.
yeah, but it's just interesting. But the mind is a very, very powerful tool.
Yep. That could be used for good or evil,
Hmm.
depending on how we direct it.
Yeah, it's. I was watching a little bit. Have you watched the Clone Wars animated series?
I
Like
have
not the
both
you. Yeah, okay.
Tartakovsky and
Tartakovsky.
the Filoni series as well. Yeah.
I don't like trying to pronounce his name because I feel like I do it wrong sometimes. Yeah, I
We went
enjoy both of
purpose
them.
with his name. Yeah.
Yeah. I was actually watching the Mortis arc yesterday,
Mm,
and that's pretty deep.
it is. It
It
is
is
deep.
it is
Yeah.
very deep.
I
It's
didn't. I'm happy to admit that I didn't understand it the first time I saw it.
right, neither did I.
I'm not sure what they're trying to say here. It took multiple viewings, and then the Fate of the Jedi expanded its lore a bit. Where Abeloth and her origins.
Oh, come
Um,
okay. I haven't read that,
oh,
the Fate of the Jedi series. But yeah, no, that's okay.
oh, cool. No spoilers.
Yeah, I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
That's awesome.
Everyone when I got into doing this was always hyping up the new Jedi Order series.
Mm,
And it's like I was fortunate enough to get all the books in one shot. Um, and I've had them, and they're like, "No, Steve, just wait. Read some of the other EU. Read these books first. Read this. It'll pay off for you later." And now I'm starting to see that,
hmm.
right? So
It does pay off.
yeah,
There are
because it's like,
things, yeah, and that's true for the Legacy series as well. Like there are payoffs from earlier works, um, particularly, again, no spoilers, right? So in Young Jedi Knights books that Kevin Anderson and Rebecca Moesta co-wrote. You get to know Jason and Jaina really quite well because it's mainly about their training and their group of friends in Luke's academy. And just like with the Jude Watson books, like they're YA, but they're I think a crucial part of continuity, particularly because you get to know them so well. And Jason's a bit of a he's like a he makes his corny jokes constantly,
He's different.
And in the legacy of the Force series, some of the chapters have like Jason's like jokey like quotes from those books. And now they're much older in that series, and their paths have gone down, different lanes. And that's all I'll say. It's very poignant to be reminded of who he was, when he was a kid.
Okay.
It's very, very poignant. So that's it. I'm shutting up. I'm not going to speak anymore on it.
All right.
So
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes when I'm, when I listen to the other folks and they're talking about them, and it's like I, should pause it or fast forward, or if there's a live stream, or because I don't want to spoil it all.
No,
The Chewbacca one was a big enough one.
it's great that you managed to find friends that didn't know what happened to Chewbacca, because it seems to me anyway that would have been like common knowledge, but you realize it's not necessarily. It really isn't. Like, a lot of attention has been focused on, like, especially in the last 15 years, on new canon and those stories. So there's a whole new generation that grew up not knowing that
Yeah. Well,
in Vector Prime this thing happens.
yeah. This is like the first Star Wars books that my one buddy Mike is reading, and they're brothers, James and Mike, and I've known them for a long time. We used to play Magic the Gathering together. Mike owns a tabletop card shop here in town, game
Nice.
store, Game Nights. We'll give them a shout out. Great place. Look them up on Facebook. So he's reading Star Wars for the first time. He's a fan of the shows, the movies, the whole shebang.
Right.
So he's reading it that way. His brother James has read some of the material, and then I'm the one that's read the most out of the three of us.
Cool.
So yes, it's kind of a different experience for all three of us, really. And it's cool that we get together once a week in the morning on the weekend, and for an hour, and we just talk, because we kind of live right close by each other. So it's just awesome. It's been a really good time.
That is awesome. I love that. Not everybody gets that, so I'm glad that you've got that, man. You mentioned earlier about the Clone Wars. So have you guys all seen it, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, they're actually rewatching it, because that show was a long time ago now, and it's a lot to kind of. Even I should rewatch it, and that's why I just I'll watch the Mortis arc.
Nice.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it all. I liked the Tartakovsky one. I thought that was cool and badass in its own way, really.
Yeah.
I know how the style of the animation, the cartoonish. It was cool. It was quick, to the point, action. And then Dave Filoni in his situation, what's your thoughts on Dave, if you don't mind me asking?
I feel I try to have a more nuanced approach, because I've run the gamut in my years since it came out, from feeling resentful at first that it seemed to be messing up this very meticulously crafted Clone Wars project, multimedia project, right?
Okay.
But to now going to the other end of the spectrum and thinking, no, this is like some very, very good material here, and credit where it's due. To now that Dave maybe has full reign, I don't know, to sort of pursue this as he will, wondering, so he's bringing Thrawn in. Are you guys caught up with
Oh yeah, I am. Yep.
Okay, so
Ahsoka.
yeah, so he's bringing Thrawn in, and she's mentioning things like Heir to the Empire, and I'm thinking, so is he doing his own version of these books, or is he going to sort of adapt them from a different point of view? Like, so I'm curious as to what that all ultimately means, and I know that fans have very wildly divergent reactions. I want to be positive with all of it, and enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah.
And as far as the Clone Wars are concerned, there have been retcons already in place, so to smooth things out. And then there are things that weren't retconned, that Leland said he would, but then with the buyout, he was like kind of let off the hook. And so, I could figure out a way to, and several of us could, like, Dan, Abel, Rich, Jason, we could figure out a way to make those discrepancies work. But with sort of Legends cast sort of to the discard pile, nobody's besides us is really, and the fans are really interested in that. So, even Peel, I think a fan did come up with a very good retcon recently. Of course, I can't remember it at the moment, but that's it. It's left to us. Currently, it's been left to the fans to figure out, right?
Yeah.
And there are people that will just completely discard the Clone Wars, or say it's an in-universe thing. I don't take it that far. I'm open to the challenge of making it work.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Really.
And Rebels, when I was closed off to Rebels, I was feeling disappointed and resentful with the buyout and the way they handled the expanded universe, and so I kind of shunned all like anything new. But some time passed, and I said, all right, let me just approach this with an open mind. And Rebels really surprised me, like in a really positive way. Like I think the animation, which wasn't Filoni's fault, Disney gave a certain budget for what how the show would look, in terms of the animation. I don't particularly care for it. I liked the like late season Clone Wars.
Well, yeah.
Which had really become very beautiful and
looked good.
Yeah, so it felt like a step down, but story-wise, I thought it was very strong, and I was pleasantly surprised by the fact that it could fit. It could fit, like, so there's this quote unquote one canon approach where fans try to, figure out what could fit in a single like universe.
Yeah.
I don't particularly subscribe to it myself. I have my approach is one canon, three universes. So it's all canon, but it's three separate universes. And sometimes there are echoes that are the same in each. The films, at least the 6 films, are pretty much the same in each, or at least in the 2, the Disney universe and then the expanded universe. And there could be other things that are the same or similar. So I liked that Rebels was as strong as it was, and that it could feasibly
fit in.
Yeah. Depending again on your point of view.
Yeah. I like that though, because that's how I look at it. I love the expanded universe is incredible. Like the storytelling, the whole, I like it. Like I said earlier, it feels like it. Like it works, it fits, it is.
Yeah.
But I can decipher between them.
Right.
You know what I'm like? the new Disney stuff. Like, I can understand when that first happened. I get that. I would be hurt and mad and, well, to the man, you know. But now I didn't experience that because I wasn't as heavily as involved as I am now
Right.
during that time. But like you said, time passed for everyone now, and things are starting to kind of pop up. And okay, this could work. This makes sense. Rebels, for example, yeah, Ahsoka, how the latter parts of the Clone Wars and what they did there with the storytelling. I'm caught up with all of it. I watch all of it. I take it for what it is, and I enjoy some of it, and some of it it's like, okay, well, that really didn't work. Like Obi-Wan, I love that Ewan McGregor and Christian Hayden was back,
Yeah.
but it's like, yeah, some of it, that's Obi-Wan and Darth Vader. You really need to make that work good.
Yeah. Yeah. And it kind of didn't. That was unfortunate. There's there are reasons behind why, like, some of the Disney Plus shows, whether it's Marvel or Star Wars, have been, failing in many regards, in terms of the writing and the production value, and which others on YouTube have sort of gotten into, which is mainly the rush to bring content out, and maybe less of a focus on the writing and making sure that those scripts are 100% before you start filming.
Yeah.
And it's true with even some of the latter day MCU films. You can, but that's sort of a Hollywood problem of late, because of the shift and because of streaming and the nature of it, and letting go of older executives who kind of knew how to do things, and bringing in newer people, who maybe don't know how to construct a series properly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems that sort of need to be fixed in that sphere to get these shows to be top quality. But then something like Andor comes along, which I don't care, like, what universe which of the universes you think it fits in, whether that's the Disney canon or whatever. I love that series. Like, I think it's brilliant from top to bottom. And the fact that it even references, like, the Rakata, like, it even has, like, these, like, strong EU kind of ties to it, I think is brilliant. I actually wrote an essay on how Rogue One could fit into the EU, could fit into Kyle Katarn's story, and these other stories about how the Death Star plans, were disseminated. So yeah, I can send that to you, by the way, if you want.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I forgot which one of the Sequart books that I wrote that for, but and then I know that loses fans, like, when it's, like, when you say stuff like that, because there is still a lot of simmering resentment. It is because it's the way it was handled. If they had handled it in such a way that this it was a parallel universe situation, and Legends was allowed to continue along its path, and the new canon was allowed to continue along its path, parallel to one another.
Yeah.
If it had been structured in that way, I think you would not have had the amount of resentment, particularly from EU fans, because you can't, like, 35 years of this one story, and then to suddenly abruptly just cut it off.
That's a heavy hit.
Yeah, that's a big hit. And there are people on the outside who don't know the EU will say, "Oh, you have hundreds of stories, and it's all confusing, and what do you need more for?" Like, it's like, no, guys, you don't understand. There are thousands of years of history here, and numerous stories to be told, and many that had yet to be told or were in the middle of being told when this, when the axe fell.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's never flown with me.
I was gonna say that's the biggest gripe I would hear mostly is that there's just so much material. Well, yeah, there is because it's
It's,
big galaxy
it's
of
big. It's
stuff, and you
pulling.
should be happy there's a lot of stuff.
Absolutely. Not everybody wants to go, into the rabbit hole, and I get that
Yeah, yeah.
100%. I don't. There are franchises that I only can appreciate on the surface level. Like the MCU is a good example. Like, I'm not a fan of superhero comics, whether that's Marvel or DC. I make the one exception with Swamp Thing, but that was never a superhero comic. Those
Right.
superheroes have come into it, which I wish they hadn't done. But be that as it may, and it's not that I'm against it. It's that I don't. It's not my sphere of interest, and so I've never dived down that hole. But I have enjoyed the films, and I've been on the side of fans who wanted to be closer, to hew closer to the comics. I'm on the side of fans when they say, we're tired of another reboot in continuity. Like, just do it right the first time. Like, I'm on their side. I'm on the side of fans. I don't have to have read all of that stuff to understand their love for it and their desire for it to, to maintain its continuity.
Yeah.
This is why I don't understand, those who are anti-EU. It's like, oh, you don't have to love this stuff or read it or any of it, but why are you raining on our parade? What's it to you that you would attack us and attack it and make these ridiculous vitriolic comments
And
It's like,
accusations.
right? Like, I don't get it. Are you that insecure in your fandom that you've got to tear down this thing over here, this very niche thing? Like, why? Like, who does that? Like,
There's a lot of history
enjoy
here.
what you enjoy.
Yep. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Like you said earlier about, like, like, why can't we just get along? Like, and look, sometimes, a rotten apple can spoil the whole bunch, and it's why I tell fans who have had bad experiences on social media platforms, which is come over to ours, because we have moderation, we, not heavy moderation where you can't say anything, but we have balanced moderation, that makes sure that the trolls and the bullies don't take over.
Yeah. I was
And
going to
that's
say,
happening. Yeah. Yeah.
it's a beautiful community. Honestly, I've been so accepted, and people have explained things to me and just gave me a buttload of information and sent me some things even. It's been incredible.
I'm
Really.
glad to hear it. And there are good communities out there. We're like in pockets. We may not all be in the one place. Like it used to be, like in the old days, it was like the Force.net's forums or the Dark Horse boards, because Dark Horse had its own like message boards and stuff. And those were like central hubs. You just don't have that anymore. You have pockets, So find a pocket where you feel safe and accepted, and where the bad actors haven't taken over.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately there are miserable people that just want everybody else to be miserable. I mean, that's just the reality of this world. But they're the minority voices, although they tend to be the loudest.
Yeah.
So yeah, get out of those spaces, because they're just going to bring you down, and come and join the positive communities.
Get out of the dark side.
That's it. Yeah.
Right.
There's no point swimming in those kinds of, like polluted oceans, because you're just going to end up unhappy. Like, you can't argue with people that just want to tear down, and that's not to say, by the way, that there can't be honest criticism of certain books, certain comics, certain stories,
Yeah, no, right. Do it in a respectful way.
right.
You can have your opinion if it's negative or not, but do it in a manner, just how you word it, how you portray it, how you come across.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
genuine. Just do it genuinely, kinda.
Beautifully said, and hopefully, that comes with maturity, as people get older and they, whatever angst they're dealing with, because that's more a reflection of them.
Yeah.
When you're trolling people, that's a you problem. Like if you're getting enjoyment out of riling people up, that little sadism there, that's something for you to work on.
Yeah. No. And it's probably an age thing. You're right. Because yeah,
Yeah.
age, you go, well, and I know you go through time, you change. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a fact. You grow. It's a part of life, growing. We talked about that earlier. You got to
Hopefully.
try different things. You got to
Yes.
grow, but
Yeah.
hopefully you grow in a positive way.
That's right. Yeah, because fungus can grow too.
Yeah, that's true. So do you collect?
Yeah, I
You
do.
yeah.
Like physical media.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%.
I prefer that, by the way.
Yeah, I when it comes to movies and music, and of course literature, and that's not to say that the digital medium doesn't have value. It certainly does. And if you're reading more because you have an e-reader, uh, yeah, then that's a great thing. Anything that helps you to read more. But I'm old school. I like the
Me too.
tactile sensation. I like to smell a book. I like to touch a book. I like how it looks on a shelf. Um, Ignore the shelf back there. That's badly in need of rearrangement. I have most of my library is downstairs. That's where all of my Star Wars books are. And it's like sprawling, a little too sprawling. And in a way, it's like the reboot allowed me to kind of like catch up a little bit. So if they do restart it again, I'll be in like a better place to like. 'Cause I'm like running out of like, where am I going to put the next bookcase?
Yeah, I know. That's kind of what I got this behind me. I got something over here, out in the other room. It's like,
But I don't want to rely on digital media because you don't actually own digital content.
yes.
You may think you do, you may believe you purchased it, but you don't. And if a company goes out of business, if a company consolidates with another company, um, and something, and you guys who are building digital libraries, like just pay attention to what these streamers are doing. So like Disney, they deleted Willow, the
I
series,
know.
and they deleted something else that was like on its platform for like a week or two. Warner Brothers, or it's now called Max, deleted Raised by Wolves, which was a phenomenal show, by the way, spearheaded by Ridley Scott, and other things. Now they may farm those out to other streamers, they may not. If you love something, don't be reliant on these corporations to keep it there for you.
Yeah.
Because they may not be. And I mean, did you ever see the animated series Final Space?
I've heard of it.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
Really, really good. I highly recommend it if you can find it. Because again, it was deleted. There were only the first 2 seasons were only ever released on physical media. So I had to find the 3rd season through other means, download it, burn it onto a disc. So I've got it now.
Now you own, yeah.
And thank God they allowed the creator to do a graphic novel to finish off what would have been the 4th season. I think I got it right. I think it was the 4th season. But again, so there's another amazing show that was just vanished out of existence. And again, like some people say, oh, well, the Willow series sucked, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. It's nothing to do with that. You can like it, you can hate it, whatever. Some people liked it. Some people it should not have been ceremoniously just taken from them. Because if they take things that like you don't like, eventually they're going to take things you do like. So be supportive of your community, as fans of art and entertainment, and make your voices known. And this is why physical media is so important, because if at least they release this stuff, if they at least do that, then we can have it. And then they can do whatever they want with it. If they don't want to pay residuals and they want to, delete it from their streaming service, fine. Here it is. It's on my shelf. So that's why physical media is so important, because we cannot trust these things that we love to remain there forever, because they may not be. And they're starting to know. Oh,
That's
he
Mary.
or she.
This
is gorgeous.
This is my ragdoll. This is Mary.
Hi, Mary.
Say hi, Mary. My little girl, aren't you, Mary?
She is beautiful. Oh my God.
She's a sweetheart. I'd put her up here, but I'd be afraid she'd jump down and get hurt. I got a standing desk.
Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah, it raises up. So.
I know you said that was necessary for you, so that you're not sitting too long, which is not good for us, for any of us, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, look, this one.
Oh yeah.
Felt he needed some attention since Mary was getting all of it.
Yeah, she's a precious thing. Unfortunately, we brought her to the vet when we first got her, because her eye kept leaking. And he's like, oh, here's some drops. Well, her retina, or the lens, detached, so now she's blind in one eye.
I didn't know that could happen to cats. Was it due to a physical injury?
No, he didn't know. He thought maybe it was an infection or something. It's just, so it's like her lens is. Yeah,
I've had retinal detachment surgery.
Oh, you have?
I have, on both eyes. They were threatening to detach, and I caught it in time. Thankfully, I am due for another ophthalmology visit, actually, but now I have a ton of floaters due to the surgery, but it saved my vision. So I didn't know that could happen but I guess that makes sense, that we get stuff and they get stuff too, and that sucks.
Yeah,
it just does. They handle it better though. Like, they complain a lot less.
Yeah, well, imagine what they're thinking. She's such a. Oh, I love her so much. She had another issue too, and we didn't know. She was whining a lot outside the litter box, and then we caught her trying to go, pee outside of it, and apparently she had, like, they called, like, some kind of diamond. You know what I'm talking about? Cats get it, where it's kind of like a bladder, urine, like maybe kidney stones for us, urinary stuff. Yeah. So, oh my gosh, when we found that out, I felt so terrible for her. I had no idea, but she's good now, and we got her on a better diet and things along that lines to help. She hasn't had a problem since. But
that's key with a lot of things is diet. I had to learn that with my dogs long ago, and again, doing research, the importance of research, that dogs used to live longer lives prior to the introduction of dry food, which I think was by Purina, but don't quote me on who the company was, but they had lived much longer. And now, as a result of commercial dry dog food, they were living much shorter lives. And I thought, that's ridiculous. And I'm going to change up. So now you can find dry dog foods that are much more nutrient dense and a lot less crap.
More organic.
Exactly right. That's another factor too. I mean, and that's what got me on the kick, even from my own diet, which was to switch over to a more organic local, if possible, approach, which was great. I mean, so, knowledge is power.
Yes, it is.
It really is. And, we see our society suffering from heart disease and from diabetes and, other things. And a lot of that is due to the commercial food system in this country, and the
Yes.
pharmaceutical industry as
I was
well.
just gonna say, yeah, that too. Yeah, it's all chemically manufactured, designed, pumped full of bioengineered rubbish.
Absolutely. Yeah. So,
And
wow, we got into some deep and dark
um,
societal territory there. Oh, you froze.
still there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Gee,
I'm waiting for you to unfreeze. Speaking of the consequences of society's ills.
yeah. Am I unfroze now? Am I good?
You're frozen in a different position now.
Jeepers crumbs here. Oh, there. Oh, you're-
Not yet.
Maybe they heard us and they don't
That's
want us talking about that kind of stuff.
I do not put it past them.
Yeah, that's a conversation for another time.
Yes, because I am a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. So,
Yeah, I'm with you. Have you ever heard of Alex Jones?
I have, yes.
Is that a little too extreme?
He did get too extreme, which is unfortunate because, it led to him, and I don't know what compromises he made in his own life, because once he got extreme, I kind of really did tune out. But I was an old school, like, Mulder Scully kind of X-Files
Yeah.
conspiracy theorist, sort of before it went off the rails. But now there's a great YouTube show called The Y Files. If you've
Okay.
never seen it, you would love it, Steve.
I will
It's
check it out.
it's a guy and his goldfish. And he's like more the skeptic and the goldfish is the believer. And I I know that sounds hilarious, and it is hilarious, but it's also very serious. Like, he also very seriously and balancedly, that's not a word, I coined the word, in a balanced way, approaches conspiracies, and does his research and looks at the facts to see, well, what can be, what can reasonably be debunked, but what can reasonably be true.
Okay.
And it's cool to get the two, like, different perspectives, because, like I said, his talking fish,
The Y
you know,
Files. I'm gonna write that down.
the Y Files. Um, his name is AJ. The fish's name is Hecklefish, and it is brilliant. And they cover so many different topics under the sun. And it is refreshing to get a balanced approach, because some channels will take just a skeptical look, and others will take just an unquestioning believer's approach. So to have a balance, with somebody who is doing the research and saying, well, it could be this, it could be that, let's keep
Right.
an open mind. Love that.
I do too. I
Yeah.
do too. Yes. I agree with you 100%. 100%. That's how I look at things too. It's like, but also leads back to research. Due
diligence. You have, like, in this world, we can't, we can't just skirt by and not learn anything. But it doesn't help us. It doesn't help our families. It doesn't help our friends. Then we're at the mercies, of the powers that be, which control the narrative, oftentimes. And this also too, like, as a Black Sabbath fan, like, there's a lot of that in there. Like, if you listen to, like, the lyrics on Volume 4 and even a Master of Reality, there's a bit of that. So I from a young age, I grew into this, to always kind of question things, not necessarily in a cynical way, because cynics go too far, and to the other extreme. An open mind means that you question things, you question mainstream narratives, you question alternative narratives, you research, you make up your mind, you listen to other people, when they have, ideas, and hopefully they listen to you. this is all honest debate and how discourse should be, not shouting matches, not ad hominem attacks, not withdrawing into echo chambers. Those are very unhealthy ways of dealing with your fellow humans.
I will say, them are all fantastic points.
Thank
I
you.
will say, if we took money out of politics, the world would be a different place.
1000%. Yes. Completely different.
Yes,
Yeah.
I full-heartedly believe that.
Yep. And that transcends. That's something I think, as Americans, we can all agree upon. No matter what your political, leanings are,
Right.
we can all agree upon that politicians should not be in service to corporations, but to people, to their constituents. It seems like common sense, but it's not how things run.
No,
Sadly.
right.
Yeah.
And also, I know we talked about the pharmaceuticals and medical, it's all become just about money. There's no one that really wants to help anyone anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a bummer.
It is a bummer. Yeah, that's greed, because there is plenty of money to be made, but they're not content with millions. It has to be billions.
Right.
That's a spiritual ill. I will use the word evil, because it is ultimately, because it's at the expense of people who are suffering. Ultimately, all people of all backgrounds suffer as a result of greed. So
Well, they say it's the root of all evil.
yeah, exactly. Not money, but the love of money.
Right.
Yeah, there's often that like disconnect. Money is fine, but when you love it to that point, that's greed.
That's the issue. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Isn't it funny how these ancient texts, it can inform reality, and help us be more aware of the world we live in, and the powers that be, and the way they control things. But see, this is why great genre fiction, science fiction, space opera, fantasy, horror, like they've always spoke to these things, in some ways subtle, in some ways overt, but they've always spoken to the human condition and societal ills. And so as readers of these things, I think we are a bit more aware than maybe the average person who's not paying attention or who's not interested, might be. I like to believe that, because that's always been the case. Genre fiction has always spoken to these things, and we can learn from all of this if we allow it.
Oh, well, there's books. I have a friend that swears that there's time travelers in the world.
That's one of the topics that the Y-Files covers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm excited to check this out. I truly am.
Yeah,
he said, like books like 1984.
Yeah.
Or, Animal Farm.
Yeah. Animal Farm's a great example. Yeah, that's why I want more people to read. And I always encourage people to read more, because I think there's more to be gained, as a human being living in this world. You gain more from reading than you will from watching television.
Yeah.
And again, that's not to say that there isn't great television, because there is 100%.
Yes.
But more television tends to be vacuous than not. Whereas with books, more books tend to be more beneficial than not, have more depth, have greater meaning. And it's sad, because I feel like the school systems tend to discourage reading, in many ways. And, students come out feeling burnt out and don't want to read anymore. Maybe because they've been forced to read things that they don't like, that don't communicate to them. And that's unfortunate. And I've heard many of these stories saying, "Oh, I stopped reading after high school or after college because I had to read all this stuff for school and it was so boring and blah blah blah." So it'd be nice. Yeah, I'd like to see the school systems like allow students to choose from a range. We had when I was a kid, we had the Scholastic Book Fair come into town, and they had all of these great, these great books that we could choose from. And I picked up so many wonderful things, and like I said earlier about my library, had so many wonderful options. So I hope that that's the case. I want to see young people, pick up books again. I see you're frozen on me. We'll see. We'll see if we can get you back. No, you're frozen. Oh, I hear a voice out of the wilderness. No, it withdrew into the wilderness again. No, and he vanished. See, we got too deep. When you get too deep and dark in the rabbit holes, the tech companies just come in and they cut you off. We don't want you talking about this publicly. That's okay. Steve will come back. Or will he? Maybe a UFO came. Maybe a UFO was sent to come and whisk Steve away into the great beyond. We'll see. You'll probably cut all of this anyway when you get back, which is fine. You can just sort of edit the video a bit. I'll wait for you. We are at 3 hours and 13 minutes. Oh, it's just me. All by my lonesome. Okay. Roscoe's sleeping. I think he's the only cat left. Let me show you the table of contents here. He's sleeping on top of my good copy. Oh, he's back.
I don't know what happened. I just ran up and checked my internet. Everything looked good. This has never happened. They don't like what we're talking about.
I'm telling you, man. That's what I was saying while you were frozen. Uh-oh. You froze again.
Man.
Don't worry. If you go away, I'm just going to start reading from here.
Like a once-in-a-lifetime experience here. Readings with Joe Bongiorno.
That's right.
That's what you should start doing.
That would be fun. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up because Corey, did I mention Corey earlier as one of my editors? If I didn't, apologies. Corey's been amazing. He wants to start like a book club, like down the line, with fans to read. Like, remember I was talking earlier about things that before Star Wars, like the things that influenced supernatural encounters specifically and are referenced. He wants to start a book club for some of those short stories and all. So you should definitely join us.
Oh,
assuming you can hear me right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't want to lose this. We might have to wrap this up for now. I'm getting nervous here because this is one of the most fantastic conversations.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed every minute, with you. So
thank you. That blows me.
I lost you again. So sorry to have lost you. I hear you.
Hear me.
I see movement.
Okay. Oh, I'm like the only one really using the internet. Nobody's streaming nothing. It's weird.
I'm telling you, see? We start talking about conspiracies and look what happens.
I would be That would be a great honor. I'd love to jump in or be a part of whatever, you and Corey have in mind down the line. That'd be awesome.
Very cool.
That's
I'll let him know, and we'll go slowly through it because I know everybody's busy and doing stuff. But yeah, it'll be at a good, healthy pace.
keep. I want.
Nope, you're gone. You're you're frozen on me again. Let's begin our reading. Table of contents. So we have Wendigo's Child by Thomas F. Monteleone. I'm pretty sure that's a pseudonym. Torchbearer by Arthur Tuft. The Call of the Grave by Brian Ball. That's like an Irish horror story. Werewolf Boy by Nick Anderson. Ooh, Precious Bodily Fluids. That's a vampire story by Mario Martin Jr. This might be familiar to readers of Supernatural Encounters. It's The Verkolak by Brian Lomedico, which is another pseudonym. And this book was cool because it has these creepy illustrations. Like this is years before Goosebumps. There we go. Look at that. He's holding this mummy thing. This was a great opening story. Super creepy. Torchbearer is maybe my favorite in the book. This is about a young kid that's recruited to go work for the king, and the king, as it turns out, is part of a coven. Here he is. This was really creepy stuff. Like they didn't hold back, even though these were like young readers' books. There was a lot. Oh, are you back?
Am I here? I'm here.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Bongiorno. I don't want to lose this, and I want to keep talking to you. This was incredible.
We'll do it again.
This is, yes, we will, for sure. Cool. We got a lot more to discuss and unpack. I mean, you're an extraordinary gentleman.
So are you. Feeling is mutual.
I appreciate that. Is there any plugs you want to get out there? I mean, that you're so creative. You worked on a lot of projects. You got the Royal Publishing of Oz that I didn't mention. You do that. You self-publish. That's a huge thing, and we didn't even talk about that because I
next time
imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. On the next stream, we got to leave room for other.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was just an awesome. I'm sure everyone's gonna love this because you got a lot of knowledge and a lot of things that you said and unpacked there. So
thank you. It really was a joy, and that's because of you. So I can't wait for the next time.
Yes. All right, sir. Well, thank you again. Thanks to everyone watching. Mr. Joe Bongiorno, Supernatural Encounters, Star Wars fan. Just, oh my goodness sakes, it's been a pleasure, sir. And until next time,
peace.
We'll see you guys soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.